Once upon a time, in a small town where the sun always shone and the birds always sang, something strange happened that changed everything. It was a quiet night, just like any other, when the sky turned dark and angry. I was just getting ready for bed when I heard the first drops hit the roof. At first, I thought it was just rain, but as I looked out the window, my heart dropped. Instead of water, it was blood, thick and dark, splattering on the ground like a terrible omen. As I watched in horror, my mind raced with questions. What could cause such a thing? Was it a sign? I felt a chill run down my spine, and I knew that this night would be different. I could hear my neighbors gasping in disbelief, peeking out of their windows, their faces pale with fear. The rain continued to fall, and I could feel something creeping into the town. A sense of dread, an evil presence that wrapped around us like a thick fog. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something terrible. I wanted to hide under my covers, but I couldn't look away from the window. I knew that whatever was happening outside was just the beginning. I felt a strange pull to stay awake, to watch and wait. Little did I know, the night was just starting, and the horrors that awaited us would change our lives forever. As the blood rained down, strange things began to happen. People started to see visions, terrifying images that haunted their dreams and followed them into the light of day. I heard whispers in the wind, and shadows danced in the corners of my eyes. My friends began to disappear one by one, leaving behind nothing but a chilling silence. The town that I loved became a place of fear, filled with secrets and dark memories. I want to take you on this journey with me. As we dive into the night it rained blood, I invite you to listen closely, to feel the fear, and to wonder what comes next. So, grab your blanket, turn off the lights, and let's explore this terrifying tale together. And don't forget to subscribe and tell me where you're listening from. Let's keep the conversation going about this eerie night that changed everything. Are you ready? Let's begin. The rain continued to fall, and I huddled in my room, listening to the sound of the drops hitting the ground. It was a rhythmic, unsettling sound that echoed in my mind. I could hear my parents whispering in the next room, their voices tinged with worry. I wanted to call out to them, to ask what was happening, but I felt frozen in place, unable to move. The blood-red rain was like a nightmare come to life, and I was trapped in it. I glanced out the window again, and the sight was even worse. The streets were turning into rivers of blood, flowing like a dark tide. I could see my neighbors standing outside, their faces illuminated by the eerie glow of the streetlights. They looked lost, as if they were searching for something they couldn't find. I felt a sudden urge to join them, to understand what was happening, but fear held me back. Then, I heard a scream, a piercing sound that cut through the night. It came from the house across the street. My heart raced as I watched the door swing open, and a figure stumbled out, covered in what looked like blood. It was Mrs. Thompson, the kind old lady who lived alone. She was crying and shaking, her eyes wide with terror. "Help me," she shouted, her voice trembling. "It's coming. It's coming for us all." I wanted to run to her, to help her, but I felt rooted to the spot. What was coming? I glanced back at my parents, but they were still whispering, their voices growing more frantic. I felt a wave of panic wash over me. I couldn't just sit here. I had to know what was happening. I slipped out of my room and crept down the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the front door, I paused, taking a deep breath. I opened the door slowly, the hinges creaking in the silence. The air was thick and heavy, and the smell of iron filled my nostrils. I stepped outside, and the sight before me made my blood run cold. The streets were empty now, the only sound the soft patter of the blood rain. I could see shadows moving in the distance, dark shapes that flickered in and out of sight. I called out for Mrs. Thompson, but there was no answer. My voice echoed into the night, swallowed by the darkness. Suddenly, I heard a low growl, like an animal lurking just out of sight. I turned, my heart racing, and I saw a figure emerging from the shadows. It was tall and thin, with long arms that hung down to its knees. Its eyes glowed red in the darkness, and its mouth twisted into a cruel grin. I stumbled back in fear, but it was too late. The creature lunged at me, and I felt a cold hand grab my arm. I screamed, but the sound was lost in the rain. Just as I thought it was all over, a bright light flashed in the sky, illuminating the creature for a brief moment. It was then that I saw its true form. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones, its face twisted in a grotesque smile. I felt a surge of terror as I realized this was no ordinary creature. It was something from my worst nightmares. I turned to run, but the blood rain splashed around my feet, making it hard to move. I raced down the street, the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. I could hear the creature behind me, its growls growing louder with each step. I knew I had to find safety, but where could I go? The town felt like a trap, a place where darkness had taken hold. As I ran, I saw flickering lights in the distance. It was the old church at the end of the street. I remember my parents telling me stories about how the church was a place of refuge, a sanctuary for those in need. I sprinted towards it, praying that I could make it inside before the creature caught up to me. I reached the church door and flung it open, stumbling inside. The air was thick with the scent of candles and incense, and the flickering light cast eerie shadows on the walls. I could hear the sound of my breath echoing in the silence, and I felt a moment of relief wash over me. I was safe, at least for now. But as I looked around, I realized I wasn't alone. The church was filled with people, my neighbors, all gathered in fear. They looked at me with wide eyes, their faces pale and drawn. I could see Mrs. Thompson in the corner, shaking uncontrollably, and I rushed to her side. "What happened?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What's going on?" "It's the blood rain," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's a sign of warning. We're being watched." I felt a chill run down my spine as I looked around the room. Everyone was whispering, sharing their fears and visions. Some spoke of shadows that followed them, while others mentioned voices that called their names in the night. I felt a sense of dread settle over me, and I knew that whatever was happening was far from over. As the night wore on, the rain continued to fall outside, and the atmosphere in the church grew heavier. We lit candles and prayed, hoping for protection from whatever evil was lurking in the darkness. But deep down, I felt a growing sense of hopelessness. What could we do against something so powerful? Suddenly, the doors of the church burst open, and a gust of wind swept through the room. The candles flickered wildly, and I could see the fear etched on everyone's faces. A figure stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the blood-red sky. It was tall and shadowy, its features obscured by darkness. I felt a wave of terror wash over me as the figure stepped inside. It moved with an unnatural grace, gliding across the floor like a wraith. The whispers in the room grew louder, panic rising as we all realized who, or what, had come to us. "It's here," someone gasped, and I could see the fear in their eyes. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt glued to the ground. The figure approached, its eyes glowing like embers, and I could feel the weight of its gaze upon me. "Why do you gather here?" it asked, its voice a chilling whisper that sent shivers down my spine. "Do you think you can hide from the truth?" I wanted to answer, to tell it we were scared and didn't know what was happening, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I felt a strange pull, as if the creature was drawing out my fears, feeding off my terror. "It's the blood rain," I finally managed to say, my voice shaky. "What does it mean?" The figure smiled, a twisted grin that sent chills through the room. "It means you have been chosen," it said, its voice echoing in the church. "The blood is a gift, a reminder of the darkness that lies within you all." I felt a wave of panic wash over me. What did it mean? Chosen for what? The room erupted in chaos as people began to scream and shout, trying to escape the creature's grasp. I felt a surge of fear, and I knew I had to do something. "Stay together," I called out, trying to rally everyone. "We can't let it divide us." But the creature only laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You think you can fight me? You're already mine." With that, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. I could hear the sound of footsteps, the panic rising as people stumbled around, searching for a way out. I grabbed Mrs. Thompson's hand, pulling her close. "We have to stick together," I shouted, trying to keep my voice steady. But deep down, I felt the weight of despair pressing down on me. How could we fight something so powerful? Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and I saw the creature standing in the center of the room, its eyes glowing like fiery coals. It raised its hand, and I felt a wave of energy wash over me, filling the room with a suffocating darkness. "Embrace the blood," it hissed, its voice wrapping around us like a serpent. "Let it flow through you, and you will understand." I felt a surge of anger rise within me. I wouldn't let it control me. I wouldn't give in to the fear. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. "No!" I shouted, my voice ringing out in defiance. "We won't let you take us?" The creature paused, its eyes narrowing as it studied me. I could feel the tension in the air, a battle of wills between us. I knew I had to be strong, to fight against the darkness that threatened to consume us all. As I stood there, I could see my neighbors rallying around me, their faces filled with determination. We were stronger together, and we wouldn't let the creature win. I felt a surge of hope as we joined hands, forming a circle of light in the darkness. "Together," I called out, my voice steady. "We are not afraid." The creature snarled, its form shifting and twisting as if it were losing its grip on reality. I could feel the energy building around us, a powerful force that pushed back against the darkness. The blood rain outside continued to fall, but inside the church, we were creating our own light. With one final push, we raised our voices in unison, chanting words of strength and unity. The creature let out a howl of rage, its form flickering as the light began to engulf it. I felt a surge of power as we pushed back against the darkness, and I knew we were winning. But just as victory seemed within reach, the creature lunged forward, its claws outstretched. I felt a sharp pain as it struck me, and my vision blurred. I could hear the cries of my neighbors, the sound of panic rising again. "Don't give up," I shouted, my voice barely a whisper. "We can do this." As the darkness closed in around me, I felt a warmth spreading through my body. It was the light of my friends, their strength fueling my own. I focused on that light, letting it guide me as I fought against the pain. With one final push, we shouted together, and the light exploded around us, filling the church with a blinding brilliance. The creature let out a final scream, and I felt the darkness shatter, breaking apart like glass. As the light faded, I found myself lying on the floor of the church, surrounded by my neighbors. The blood rain had stopped, and the air felt lighter, as if the weight of the darkness had been lifted. I looked around. I found myself lying on the floor of the church, surrounded by my neighbors. The blood rain had stopped, and the air felt lighter, as if the weight of the darkness had been lifted. I looked around, feeling the warmth of their presence, their worried faces gazing at me in relief and confusion. I tried to sit up, but my body felt heavy. Something wasn't right. The flickering candles cast strange, dancing shadows on the walls, and for a moment, I thought I saw the outlines of faces lurking just beyond the light. I could hear hushed whispers, people talking about what had happened. Someone said it was over, but I didn't believe it. Deep down, I felt we hadn't escaped at all. I stood, clutching Mrs. Thompson's hand tightly. "We need to check outside," I said firmly, my voice trembling but resolute. As I moved to the doors, the uneasy feeling grew stronger, wrapping around me like a wet, cold blanket. It felt as if the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. When I opened the door, a wave of cold washed over me. The streets that had once been bright with the glow of streetlights were now draped in thick darkness, like a heavy curtain. I stepped outside, and just as my foot hit the ground, a chilling wind howled through the air, carrying with it a strange, metallic scent that made my stomach churn. The ground was still slick with the remnants of the blood rain, glistening like a pool of crimson under the faint light. "Look," a neighbor shouted, pointing toward the town square. I turned, and what I saw made my heart race. Shadows were moving, shifting like living creatures. Shapes flickered just outside the reach of the dim light, darting in and out of focus. I squinted into the darkness, trying to make sense of it, but my mind spun with fear. Those weren't ordinary shadows. They were long and twisted, writhing like snakes. My next thought was to run back into the safety of the church, but before I could move, another scream pierced the night, a high-pitched, desperate cry that echoed in the air. It came from the direction of the square, and terror gripped me. "We have to help," I yelled, my heart pounding as we rushed into the dark, the flickering light behind us becoming a distant memory. The closer we got, the louder the screams became, mixing with low growls that vibrated in my bones. I could feel fear radiating from my neighbors, their eyes wide and wild. I gripped Mrs. Thompson's hand tighter as we approached the dim light from the street lamp. When we reached the square, what we saw sent a chill straight down my spine. There were people gathered, but they weren't just frightened. They appeared entranced. They stared into the dark, as if something was pulling them closer. Their faces were blank, eyes glazed over like they were in a trance. I could see the strange shadows weaving around them, whispering in voices too low for me to hear. I stepped back, pulling Mrs. Thompson with me, trying to get away from the growing madness. "We need to snap them out of it," I cried, desperation twisting my voice. But how? I clutched a nearby stone, my heart racing, and began yelling their names, calling out to them, hoping to break whatever spell had taken hold. "Mark! Susie! It's me! Come back!" My voice rang out in the stillness of the night, drowning in the oppressive air. Some of them blinked, confused, but others remained entranced, their faces still frozen in horror. Then, just beyond the group, I noticed a larger shadow forming, moving in a way that suggested it was watching us. Suddenly, a loud crashing sound shattered the silence, and I spun around to see a nearby window of the old bakery burst open, glass raining down like diamonds in the moonlight. Out of the shadowed doorway stumbled a figure, someone I recognized. It was Mr. Hughes, the town's baker, but something was terribly wrong with him. His shirt was torn, and blood matted his hair. His eyes were wild like those of the others, but he was a step removed, almost aware of the horror he was part of. "Run!" he screamed, his voice ragged and thin. "Get away from here!" Before I could make sense of his warning, the shadows began to swirl around the entranced townsfolk, pulling them in like a whirlpool of darkness. I tried to reach out to them, to grab their arms, but the shadows lashed out at me, cold fingers brushing against my skin, sending icy trails of fear down my spine. I stumbled back, fear overwhelming me. They were hungry, greedy. The sight was too terrifying. People I had known my entire life were being devoured by their own shadows, transformed into hollow shells. They lost themselves, their expressions fading into the abyss as they sank deeper into the strange darkness. The panic spread through the group surrounding me, and in that moment, the reality of what was happening struck me. The blood rain had awakened something dark, some ancient evil that fed on fear, and we were its prey. "Back to the church!" I shouted, grabbing hold of Mrs. Thompson and pulling her with me, my heart racing as I sprinted toward the sanctuary. But as we turned to flee, the shadows caught up, reaching for us with icy, claw-like fingers. I could feel their coldness on my back, nipping at my heels. I heard their whispers, dark and seductive, promising secrets and power. No! I shook my head to clear my thoughts, focusing instead on the light of the church that grew smaller behind me. With all my strength, we ran, dodging the grasping hands of the darkness. I could feel the weight of the town's despair pressing down on my shoulders. It was a suffocating feeling, like the shadows were alive and more than just a simple trick of light. The church doors swung open before us, and for a moment, time stood still. I rushed inside, dragging Mrs. Thompson with me, and closed the door behind us just as the first of the shadows reached for the handle. The thud against the wood echoed in the silence, followed by a series of scratching sounds, like nails clawing to get in. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but quickly turned to check on the others. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. My neighbors were still inside, their faces pale and drawn. Mr. Hughes had collapsed against the wall, panting heavily as he tried to catch his breath. The room felt charged with the leftover energy from the confrontation outside. I knew I had to act quickly. We needed to unite against the encroaching darkness. "We need to gather everyone," I declared, my voice shaking but firm. As I turned to go back for the others, I noticed something. Mrs. Thompson wasn't beside me anymore. I spun around, panic rising in my chest. "Mrs. Thompson?" I called out, scanning the room. Before I could register anything, I heard a whisper, soft and sibilant, weaving through the air. "Join us, join us!" My heart raced. The shadows had followed us inside, whispering those words, trying to lure me into their trap. I fought against the darkness, trying to keep myself grounded. Through a small crack in the door, I could see them. They slithered like smoke, trying to find any tiny entrance to feel the warmth of our fear. I faced Mr. Hughes, who was still panting heavily, staring blankly at where Mrs. Thompson had been just a moment ago. "Where is she?" I asked urgently. But I quickly realized he was lost to the shadows, his eyes distant and empty. He had already succumbed to the dark energy that surrounded us. I could feel the panic rising inside of me, racing through my veins. We had to escape, but how? The shadows beat against the walls like a storm, relentless and hungry. I glanced back toward the door, heart pounding, hoping against hope that others were still outside, unaffected by the darkness. "Gather together," I cried, trying to bring the remaining neighbors to my side. "We have to stand as one. They can't take us if we're united." Some stepped forward, but I could see doubt flickering in their eyes, fear drawing its claws into their minds. I felt the whirlwind of despair trying to take hold, dark thoughts creeping in, whispering lies. What could we do? We're just a few. There are too many shadows. "No!" I shouted, pushing back the doubt. "We must believe. If we stand together, we can fight this. We have to." The knowing and unknowing began to murmur among themselves, but my voice soared over the chaos within me. I could feel the pull of fear threatening to drag me down. Yet I held on, clinging to that glimmer of hope like it was a lifeline in the dark ocean. Suddenly, another loud crash shattered the air, and the windows rattled, as if the very essence of that malevolent darkness was trying to pull us into its abyss. I turned to see the shadows coalescing into a larger shape, forming a figure that towered above us. My heart sank again. It was the same creature from before, the one that had laughed in spite of our struggle. "Why fight?" it hissed, its voice echoing around the room, chilling my bones. "You cannot escape the truth. This town is mine now, and its fears shall become your own. You think your unity can save you? The blood binds you all." The air crackled with energy as shadows wrapped around its form, feeding off our fear. I felt it close in, suffocating my spirit. Every instinct screamed at me to flee, to run away and hide, but I pressed forward, pulling my neighbors closer to me as we formed a circle. "Look at each other," I shouted, my heart racing with urgency. "Remember who you are. Remember home. We can drive this thing away. We belong here, not it." The creature snarled, its eyes narrowing as it absorbed the energy of our resolve. But I could see a flicker of doubt in its gaze, and I held on to that moment. The whispers around us grew quieter, and I could feel a shift in the air, a tension that told me we were gaining ground. "Now, together," I cried, and raising our voices in unison, we began to chant, our words becoming a shield against the encroaching shadows. With every word, I could feel the warmth of hope burning brighter, pushing back against the walls of despair that had threatened to close in on us. The creature hissed, its form shuddering as our light grew stronger, illuminating the darkness in the corners of the room. I could see the others starting to believe, their faces lighting up with understanding as we found our strength. The air crackled there as if lightning was about to strike, invigorating my spirit and fueling my resolve. Our voices rose, echoing throughout the church, shaking the very foundation with the power of our will. The shadows recoiled, swirling like a storm, trying to flee from the light. I noticed the way they twisted in confusion, losing substance as the unity of our voices shook them apart. "You will not take us?" I roared, channeling all my fear, my anger, into a lifeline of hope. With one final surge, we cried out, unleashing a wave of energy that surged throughout the church and beyond, driving the darkness back. I felt a connection with everyone around me, a bond forged by shared fear and hope, and that connection became our weapon. I thought that perhaps we would conquer this darkness together. But then, just as we seemed to gain the upper hand, I caught sight of something behind the creature, a flicker of movement that sent another chill down my spine. It was a face in the shadows, a familiar shape that made my stomach drop. It was one of my friends, Jay, who had vanished from the town just days before, his body twisted in terror, pale and gaunt, drawn into the darkness like a moth to a flame. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with a haunting sorrow that spoke of despair and hopelessness. "Help me," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the chaos. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the urge to reach for him. The shadows were pulling him deeper into their grasp, like quicksand feeding on his very essence. I turned to my neighbors, who were locked in their own battles against the shadows, their faces only partly illuminated. "Don't look away!" I yelled. "He's only an illusion. We can't let him distract us." But I could see fear creeping into their eyes, and that moment of hesitation felt like a knife to the heart. "We can't lose another." The creature laughed, low and rumbling, as it reveled in our fear. "You will all be mine. Just let go. Give in, join the shadow." I felt the pull of darkness trying to lure me closer, but it only made me fight harder. "Hold on," I cried, urging my friends. I squeezed Jay's name between my lips, as if it were a lifeline, something tangible that could bridge the divide between us. "Jay, fight!" I shouted, desperation creeping into my voice. "Remember who you are. You're not lost. You're right here with us." But the shadows didn't react to my words as I hoped. Jay's face twisted in agony, a pained expression that gnawed at my heart. The dark figure around him pulsed with hunger, tightening its grip. "Help me," he pleaded again, his voice echoing in my mind. Each word felt like a dagger. Each plea pulled me further into the void. I took a step forward, almost against my own will, my heart pounding as I tried to reach him. "No, don't do this," I roared, looking back at my neighbors desperately. "We have to help him. He's still in there." Yet the chilling laughter of the creature seemed to grow louder, vibrating through the very walls of the church. "What a sweet sentiment," it taunted. "But he's already mine. You're too weak to save him." The shadows coiled around Jay, twisting and turning, drawing him deeper into the dark until only his eyes remained visible, wide with terror and pleading. "Your weakness will destroy you all," the creature hissed, advancing toward me, its form flickering like a candle about to extinguish. I could feel it invading my mind, whispering dark thoughts, planting seeds of doubt. "Give in, embrace the fear, make it easier." For a moment, I faltered, my resolve shaking under the weight of despair. The shadow world felt alive, wrapping its tendrils around me, seducing me with promises of power and freedom from the terror that loomed. But then I remembered the warmth of my neighbors, the flicker of hope in their eyes when I rallied them. "Fight it! We are stronger together," I shouted, latching onto that guiding thought as my last anchor. I turned my focus back to Jay, pouring my energy into my voice. "You're not a shadow. You're my friend. Come back to us." With each word, I could feel a pressure building in the air around me, a tension that seemed to reach toward him. Slowly, the shadows flickered under the weight of our collective willpower. People gasped and began to chant along, their voices trembling but growing stronger with each repetition. "Jay, come back!" As the words rose, the creature shrieked, its form wavering as if losing its substance in the face of our unity. I could see the shadows around Jay retreating, flickering like candle flames caught in a gust of wind. But the more we called to him, the more ferocious the creature became, throwing Jay against the walls of shadow as if it were trying to crush him back into despair. "Stop it!" I cried out, the sound cracking like a whip in the air. "Let him go!" "Why should I?" it roared back, resentful and full of rage. "They all belong to me. You all will join them." In that moment, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet, almost as if reality itself twisted at the creature's whims. The shadows inched closer, their fingers reaching toward my throat, tightening like coils, suffocating and desperate. I gasped for air, the darkness closing in on every side, my vision blurring as dozens of faces emerged from the darkness, each one twisted in silent agony, the lost souls of those that had succumbed before. "Don't let them win!" I heard someone scream from the crowd. "We can't give in! Fight!" Fueled by that rallying cry, I summoned every ounce of strength left within me. Together, my voice rang out strong, echoing off the church walls. "We will not be conquered." Together we surged forward, hands entwined, pushing against the darkness, embodying an unwavering force in the face of despair. More and more voices joined mine, rising in strength, crescendoing into a powerful shout that pierced the veil of shadows. The air crackled with our combined energy. The walls pulsated as if the very fabric of reality held its breath. But beneath our chant, I still heard Jay's whisper, so weak and frightened. "Help me, please." And in that instant, I felt the connection between us shift. I reached into that dark void, stretching my heart out to him, desperately wishing to break the invisible chains that bound him to the shadows. "Jay!" I cried once more, channeling every bit of hope I could muster. "We won't leave you. Hold on." The creature howled in rage, attempting to drown out our voices with a harrowing scream that rattled the shattered windows. "Fools! You will perish in this. I am the darkness that feeds on your fear." But we were no longer just individuals. We were a community, a lighthouse in the storm. "No!" I shouted, lifting my voice above the chaos, as the shadows around Jay flickered again, momentarily weakening. "We will fight for each other." As I said those words, I felt something shift within me, a warm light igniting deep inside my core. I closed my eyes, concentrated, pushing the light outward, willing it to embrace Jay. I imagined that light as a rope, a tether connecting my heart to his, and I threw it into the dark, hoping it reached him. "Take my hand," I yelled, clenching my fists until my nails dug into my palms. The shadows writhed as if in pain, their forms twisting and smoking. Gradually, I noticed a change in Jay's eyes. They flickered between fear and determination, and for a moment, I thought I saw a spark of recognition. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, hissing like angry serpents, and I felt the energy in the room shift. "No!" the creature bellowed. Panic seeped into its voice for the first time. "You don't know what you're doing. You'll all fall. Don't believe it," I urged, watching as Jay's expression shifted, the haze of fear beginning to lift from his features. "Fight it. Come back. Remember who you are." As if my words were a lifeline, he turned his head slightly, flickers of clarity breaking through the murky depths of shadow. I could see the fight in him, the struggle against being consumed by the void. Tendrils of darkness still clung to him, but I sensed them losing their grip as the light within me grew stronger, fed by the energy of my friends around me. "Together," I called out again, my voice resonating with a power I never knew I had. "This is our town, our lives. We can't lose him." The shadows around us began to shrink. The weight of darkness lifted as more of my neighbors joined in, their once faint voices now a booming chorus demanding their loved ones back. Jay's silhouette began to stand taller, defiant against the shadows, and with each shout, the features of my friend, once lost to despair, became clearer. "Jay, come back!" I cried, heart racing as I witnessed him reach for the light with his own hand, grasping for whatever remnants of himself remained. In that moment, a blinding flash erupted around him, throwing the shadows back, igniting the church with brilliant light. The creature roared in fury, its form collapsing into itself, twisting and howling as if being torn apart by our unyielding bond. "No!" it screamed, its voice a chilling echo in the night. "You will regret this. This isn't over. You will pay." I felt something shift as the shadows receded, losing their grip on Jay, who staggered back into the light, his body shaking but alive. The shadowy fingers that once clung to him dissolved, and finally, he was free. We did it. My neighbors cheered, pulling together as we celebrated the small victory. I rushed over to Jay, enveloping him in a tight embrace, relief washing over me like a wave. "You're okay. You made it." But even amidst our joy, I could still sense a lingering darkness lurking just beyond our reach. The winds howled outside, wrapping around the church as if beckoning for revenge. The air was thick with tension, a sense that we'd only experienced a temporary reprieve. "We should stay together," I said, my voice dropping as concern crept back into my heart. "I know this isn't over. We have to prepare for whatever it is that comes next." The ache of fear rested heavily in my chest. We were still vulnerable, surrounded by malevolent forces that yearned for our despair. I glanced outside, watching as swirling shadows coalesced in the distance, tentatively reaching toward our sanctuary, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. "Let's barricade the doors," I urged, my heart racing. "Prepare for anything." As we moved to secure the church, I could feel an indescribable weight pressing against us, a reminder of the dark power that still lurked beyond the sanctuary's safety. The laughter of the creature echoed in my mind, taunting me, reminding me that it was not finished. "We have to keep fighting," I urged to my friends, knowing deep down that our battle against the shadows was just beginning. In those moments of preparation, I could feel the thread of fear weaving through all of us, binding us in a common purpose. But even as we barricaded the doors and secured the windows, I sensed that the real fight lay ahead. I turned to face my neighbors, determination burning in my chest. "Whatever happens, we stand together," I declared, feeling the warmth of their solidarity echo in the room. Then, suddenly, the church doors rattled violently, sending a shockwave of fear through us all. The whispers outside grew louder, an unsettling symphony that threatened to breach our fragile unity. I gripped Jay's arm, stifling the unease writhing in my gut. A slow, terrifying realization settled in. We weren't just fighting for our lives. We were fighting against something that had been awakened by our very existence. The storm brewed outside, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only scratched the surface of the terror awaiting us. The creature's laughter echoed again, deeper and darker, reverberating through my bones. I looked at my friends, each one a beacon of courage, yet it felt like every heartbeat echoed a warning of what was still to come. The shadows may have retreated momentarily, but I could feel the cold breath of danger brushing against my neck, making it clear that our greatest challenges were yet to be faced. As we prepared, I wondered, what horrors awaited us in the darkness? What nightmarish truths would we have to confront to reclaim our lives? The tension in the air was unbearable, like a storm cloud looming on the horizon, waiting to unleash its wrath. And I knew, without a doubt, that it would come. As we readied ourselves in the dim light, I felt a cold sweat trickle down my spine. The rattling at the doors intensified, a sinister rhythm punctuated by low whispers that crawled beneath my skin. The air was thick with electric tension, and I could sense that whatever lay outside was waiting for the right moment to strike. I glanced around at my friends, their faces mirroring a mix of determination and deep-seated fear. "Stay alert," I hissed, doing my best to project confidence. "We can't let our guard down." Outside, the wind howled like a chorus of lost souls, howling through the trees and sending chilling rustles across the ground. It sounded almost as if the shadows themselves were searching, prowling, hoping to find a weak spot in our defenses. I pressed my back against the heavy, battered door, and I could feel the vibrations of something waiting just on the other side. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. I jumped, my heart racing as I turned my head to see if anyone else had noticed. The flickering light distorted our features and created nightmarish shapes that loomed in my peripheral vision. For a moment, I was transported back to that moment in the church when the darkness first wrapped around us, and I was drowning in despair. "We need light," I called out, reaching for the nearest flashlight. I fumbled with the switch, and a beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the faces around me. But even the light felt weak, frail against the encroaching darkness. "Don't let the shadows touch you," I warned, thinking of the faces that had vanished into despair. I could still remember the way they looked, eyes wide as they fell victim to the cold embrace of the creature's influence. Just as we steeled ourselves, a deafening crash erupted at the back of the church. The sound reverberated through the building, causing dust and debris to rain down from the ceiling. My heart thundered painfully in my chest as I whipped around, my eyes darting to the source of the noise. A figure stumbled in through the broken door, silhouetted against the relentless storm. It was a man, but the way he moved was wrong, unnatural. His limbs were akimbo, face gaunt and twisted, eyes hollow and draped in shadow. It took only a moment for me to recognize him. One of the neighbors, someone I had known all my life, caught in anguish, body trembling as shadows coiled around his feet. "Help me," he mumbled, his voice a haunting echo, cut off by the shadows grasping at him. I felt horror claw at my insides, chilling fear surging through my veins. I couldn't let this happen again. "Get back!" I shouted, rushing toward him, but the shadows moved with him, pulling him into their depths. A horrific twist of his mouth formed a grin that belonged in a nightmare, a mixture of pain and dark delight. "No!" screamed another neighbor. "He's lost! Get away from him!" But I couldn't stand idly by. I felt a compulsion to reach out, to save the remnants of my friend fighting against the darkness. I plunged forward, against all instinct, and grasped his outstretched hand. The moment our skin met, a surge of cold shot through me, and I gasped as jarring images flooded my mind. Horrific visions from the shadows, moments of dread that played out like a warped film reel. In those split seconds, I glimpsed each soul that had been devoured by the creature, trapped in the dark, forever seeking escape. I felt their despair, their cries for help, their desperation coursing through my veins like poison. I tightened my grip, and with every ounce of strength I could muster, I yelled, "Fight it! Remember who you are!" The shadows shuddered, resisting the light of my voice, but I felt my friend's spirit flicker against the darkness. A flash of recognition glimmered in his eyes, and I could almost see him pushing against the suffocating gloom. "You're not alone," I urged, willing my warmth to envelop him. For a heartbeat, it felt as if the connection between us could sever the dark tendrils holding him hostage. The shadows screamed in fury, shrieks that echoed like 1,000 voices breaking into maddening chaos. The air frigid, the shadows twisted around, violently pulling him back. "Let go! You have to let go!" I yelled, willing him to fight as he began to dissolve into the shadows once more. "Don't give in! You can break free!" But my friend's face contorted, overwhelmed by fear as he gasped, I can't." A wicked laugh erupted from the shadows, thick and overpowering, sending waves of dread crashing over us. "How foolish you are," it said, the creature's voice weaving in and out like smoke. "One cannot retrieve what is already claimed." In a surge of dark energy, the figure lurched back, becoming a marionette controlled by sinister hands. I felt my heart drop as the shadows surged, enveloping him in a pixelated embrace, drawing him into the realm of the lost. "No!" I screamed again, rage and despair mingling in my throat. "Get back!" I tore at the shadows that grasped my friend, trying to pull him free, but it felt like trying to part a thick fog. The dark energy pushed back harder, twisting and curling, growing more powerful with each fleeting moment. Suddenly, I heard whispers rising from the rest of my neighbors, a low chant that reverberated through the church, uniting our wills. It felt as if the walls were pulsing in rhythm with the desperate energy we were generating. Fight! 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 I joined their chorus, my belief strengthening with every echoing voice. Together we can break free. With each word, it felt as if my friend fought alongside us, pushing against the hold of darkness. Just as Jamie began to fade from view, I locked eyes with him once more, reaching out with everything I had. Trust me, we'll bring you back. It was then that I felt a shift, a disturbance in the air as the creature writhed in agony, the shadows convulsing and receding slightly under the power of our shared conviction. The hold on my friend flickered with each chant, illuminating him for a brief moment. Hold on, I rallied, unable to look away from the clash of hope and despair. We are not afraid. The shadows howled louder, thrashing against the walls of the church, desperate in its attempt to regain control. It hissed a chilling threat that rattled my bones. You think you can escape? This is only the beginning. The church trembled with the clash of energies, forcing us to redouble our efforts. I focused on each individual around me, their faces alive with determination, steeling my resolve against the darkness that sought to smother us. Light the way, I shouted, calling for more flashlights, amplifying what little illumination we had. As the beams flickered across the room, I noticed shadows were retreating slightly, shrinking back from the penetrating light. The creature seemed to writhe in agony at the sight, its form shifting erratically, growing more chaotic. You can't win, it shrieked, each syllable seeping into the cracks of my psyche. Maybe we can't win, I replied, adrenaline surging through me, but we will never give in. With each flash of light, I felt emboldened, my fears replaced with fierce determination. Despite the overwhelming darkness, the bonds we were forging grew stronger. For every shadow, we have our light, I declared, and my neighbors echoed my sentiments, voices climbing higher as we channeled our combined will against the oppressive force suffocating us. And then, as if on cue, the shadows recoiled and shifted, trying to regroup around my friend. We pushed forward, enveloping him in a collective embrace of light and hope. The tendrils of darkness tangled around us, but we pressed on, flooding the room with a radiant glow that dripped into the layers of shadows and wiped their cursed touch from my friend's fading form. Together, I urged again, now desperate, now hopeful. The light we created was palpable, stretching out like the arms of love, each heartbeat resonating in unison. We are here. You are not alone. And just like that, a burst of energy surged forward. A brilliant flash erupted, illuminating the church, flooding every corner with light. I felt the shadows scream as they were forced to retreat, the swirling darkness fighting against its obliteration. For a fleeting moment, I saw a look of clarity on my friend's face as the shadows shattered around him, unable to withstand the tide of love pushing back against the void encroaching upon us. Hold on, I screamed, pulling him back, willing him to step forward once again. But as the shadows began to recede fully from his form, I heard a chilling laughter from deep within. The creature wasn't finished. The air chilled, freezing the moment, entombing our victory in a false sense of security. No more games, it hissed, its voice seeping beneath the temperature of our breaths, wrapping us in despair. You've merely reset the board. This isn't over. I felt dread creep back through my heart, a gnawing certainty that this was merely a pause, a cruel illusion of safety. Streams of cold air swept through the church, clouds of shadow swirling like a tempest, vicious and alive. The oppressive weight pressed down once more, and I turned to my friends. We must strengthen our bonds, I said, my voice stronger now, rippling with urgency. This isn't just our battle for survival. It's a battle for our souls. As we solidified our circle, I glanced outside, the darkness clawing at the windows, eager to burst back in. The creature's laughter echoed louder and louder, mocking us. But inside, I felt a new sense of clarity and strength, as if the fear had ignited a fire deep within me. Let's finish this, I declared. Light guides us. We are not afraid. And with that, a shared wave of devotion swept through us. A unified front against the shadows, together as one. We summoned the last remnants of our light to push back the encroaching darkness that tried to enshroud us. The storm wailed, but we stood our ground, illuminated by the power of our collective spirit, ready to face whatever horrors awaited us next. "Let's finish this," I declared. "Light guides us. We are not afraid." The words echoed in the heavy air, reverberating against the walls, and for just a moment, it felt as if the shadows paused, their movement stilled by our shared conviction. But the false sense of security slipped away quickly, like sand through my fingers. The creature outside grew more powerful, and the walls trembled in response, a deep groan that seemed to shake the very foundation of the church. Suddenly, a deafening crash pierced the air. The front doors of the church erupted inward, as if they had been blasted apart by an unseen force. Timber splintered, bare wooden shards flying into the crowd, unleashing a cacophony of gasps and screams. I recoiled at the sight of an enormous wave of shadow flooding through the doorway, crashing toward us like a tsunami of despair, swallowing every ounce of light around it. "Get back!" I shouted, pushing my friends away as I stepped forward. The shadows writhed, twisting into grotesque shapes, hungrily stretching toward us with malignant intent. A hand, a disembodied shadowy hand, reached for my leg, its grip icy cold, clutching at my ankle like a parasite, trying to pull me into the suffocating mass of darkness. I fought against the weight, summoning every ounce of strength within me. "No, I won't let you take me." With a fierce roar, I kicked free from its grasp, stumbling back into the light of my friends, my heart racing as I felt the cold tendrils of darkness attempting to re-establish their hold on me. The creature's voice erupted again, echoing through the chaos. "You think you can win?" it hissed, the tone mocking and cruel. "You think your light can triumph over the unending void? You are merely delaying the inevitable." Chills crawled up my spine as my surroundings shifted. The shadows writhed and convulsed as if alive, morphing into faces of those who had vanished, their expressions twisted in horror. I recognized some of them. Lost neighbors, friends, eyes wide open, mouths gaping in a silent scream before they faded back into the darkness, souls forever trapped. "Don't look!" I shouted, frantically trying to shield my friends from the spectacle. But it was too late. The shadows crept closer, wrapping around us like a thick fog, dragging forth our deepest fears. I could feel their presence breathe on my neck, and I hesitated, momentarily paralyzed by confronting my worst thoughts coming to life. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, plunging the church into near darkness. I struggled to maintain focus, but the shadows were everywhere, hovering in the corners, waiting to pounce. I pointed my flashlight into the gloom. Beams of light pierced into the darkness, illuminating grotesque creatures writhing just out of reach, their movements fluid and unnatural, limbs bending at bizarre angles. "Stand together," I cried out, urging my friends to hold on to one another, the warmth of our connection flickering like a heartbeat amidst the chaos. "We can do this. Think of all we've faced. We've got to stay united." As we formed a tighter circle, shadows buzzed around the edges. They crackled like static electricity. I could feel lines being drawn in the air, demarcating the boundaries of our fragile safety. Each flicker of light now felt like a beacon fighting back against the malevolence swirling around us. But the shadows would not relent. A chilling wind swept through the church, snuffing out some of our lights momentarily, leaving us groping in the obscurity. Panic flooded the room, voices rising in a terrified cacophony as shadows loomed closer, enveloping us in whispers. Each word felt like ice against my skin, gnawing at my sanity, luring my thoughts deeper into despair. "Stay focused," I barked, gritting my teeth against the rising tide of fear. "Focus on the light, hold on to it, don't let go." The glory of the moment felt fragile, as if a gust of wind could shatter it, and I needed to anchor my friends in the hope that flickered just out of reach. But my resolve began to waver as a figure emerged among the shadows, pushing against the brightness. It was a grotesque parody of a person. Melting skin, hollow eyes, and jagged teeth that appeared from a rictus grin, creeping closer with each heartbeat. My heart raced, memories flooding back of all that was lost, all that had been stolen. "Join us," a rasped voice like nails scraping against glass. "There is no hope. Only despair awaits you. Embrace the dark. It is your only salvation." I staggered at the sight, a suffocating wave of dread pulling me down. What was left of my confidence was almost non-existent. I could feel the grip of despair tightening like a noose around my neck. But then I heard the unity of my friends' voices, a steady heartbeat of defiance pushing against the abyss. "We are not afraid," they yelled, hands clasped tighter together. The fear shifted, turning from despair to strength. I inhaled deeply, anchoring myself in their determination. "No more!" I shouted, channeling my energy into a wave of light. It surged forth, illuminating the figure, exposing its twisted features, causing it to writhe and recoil. "We are stronger than you." I felt the shadows pushing against my resolve, threatening to shatter my spirit. But remembering the faces of those we had lost ignited something within me. "For them!" I screamed, lifting my light higher, creating a barrier against the darkness. The shadows screeched in protest, curling back momentarily as if they were scalded. Suddenly, the air grew thick, oppressive, and heavy like a weight pressing down from all directions. A feeling of dread gnawed at my insides as the walls seemed to pulse, vibrating with something sinister. The shadows morphed into a thick black mist, creeping along the floor and ceiling, consuming everything in their path. "Hold on!" I yelled, as flickers of doubt crept into my mind. It felt as though the creature were toying with us, testing our resolve, probing for weakness. I could see fear reflected in my friend's eyes, and I knew we had to act fast. The shadows began to congeal, forming shapes that darted toward us with unnatural speed. I could hardly breathe. It felt like the very essence of dread was siphoning away my will to fight. "We can't give in," I urged, gripping my friend's hand so tightly that my knuckles turned white. "We have to push back." With renewed fervor, we raised our light sources, creating a dazzling kaleidoscope of illumination that broke through the oppressive mist. The shadows recoiled as light erupted forth, illuminating the room like we had ignited 1,000 candles. The dark forms shrieked in fury, retreating momentarily from the brilliance of our combined efforts. "For every shadow, we have our light," I reinforced, and my friends mirrored my words, their voices intertwining into a powerful chant that tore through the darkness. Each word resonated, a binding tie between us that ignited flickers of hope within the oppressive atmosphere. But the creature was relentless. A booming laugh slithered through the room, mingling with our voices, distorting our rallying cry. "It won't end like this," it taunted, as the air chilled, weighing heavily upon us. "I will consume your precious light." The ground beneath us began to shake violently, pieces of plaster raining down from the walls, and I felt despair creeping back, whispering that we were fighting a losing battle. Shadows surged again, rising like specters, reaching out with elongated fingers that dripped with an inky darkness. "No!" I screamed, feeling that familiar cold wash over me. I thought back to the faces of my friends, of the life we had known, determined to keep that memory alive. "We will not let you in." Propelled by sheer will, I rallied my friends together, forming a barrier of light. We interlaced our bodies, our lights merging, forming a radiant cylinder of energy that pulsed with life. I pushed aside fear and doubt, channeling everything I had into one colossal surge of brilliance. The shadows shrieked louder, a cacophony of rage and despair that clawed at my senses as if the darkness knew its reign was threatened. The oppressive weight pushed back harder, straining against our united front, trying to extinguish the light we were building. But in that moment of chaos, as the shadows converged upon us, I felt something shift. It was as if our collective resolve acted as an anchor in the storm, a beacon amidst the fierce winds of despair. For each of us, we fight, I declared, my voice trembling but unwavering. The pulse of light surged higher, and I could see the fear dissipate from my friend's eyes, replaced by fierce determination. We were more than individuals. We were a force, a bastion against the encroaching dark. Suddenly, a blinding explosion ripped through the room, sending a wave of energy crashing outward. The shadows howled in agony, retreating rapidly, flailing like flames devoured by a sudden downpour of rain. Every whisper of despair dissipated into the ether, and a momentary silence fell as the swarming forms fled the scene. But I understood this wasn't the end. It was merely a lull in the chaos. The shadows would regroup, and in their wake, they would be more vengeful and relentless than before. Conflicting waves of triumph and dread washed over me. I could feel it in my bones, the impending doom that loomed just outside our fragile protection. "Don't relax just yet," I said, catching my breath while scanning my surroundings. The flickering lights danced eerily across the walls, revealing undulating shapes that hung just beyond our reach, teasing our senses with glimpses of what was still lurking. The thick tension hung in the air, making every breath feel heavy with expectation. We planted our feet firmly, preparing for what we knew would come next. The doors had splintered, gaping like a wound under the weight of the tumultuous storm outside. Shadows pressed against the apertures, eager to reclaim their territory, eager to spill forth into our sanctuary and snuff out our flickering flames. "Stay close," I urged again, the urgency thickening my voice. "Prepare for anything. We can't let them overwhelm us again." Just then, from the extreme edges of the room, I noticed movement. A figure emerged from the darkened recesses with slow, deliberate steps, barely illuminated by our faltering light. My breath caught in my throat as I recognized who it was. Someone I believed I had lost to the dark long ago. "Help me!" It was Emily, another neighbor, eyes wide and haunted, her voice emerging from the shadows like a lifeline. But something about her posture felt wrong. Her movements jerky and uncoordinated, as if she were caught between worlds, desperately reaching out to us yet bound by something invisible. "Emily?" I called out, heart pounding with confusion and hope. "Is that really you?" Her gaze locked onto mine, and for a split second, I could see the clarity shining through the veil of terror. But then, the shadows around her pulsed, and her features twisted into expressions of anguish as she stumbled forward, words spilling out in tortured gasps. "You don't understand. It's not safe. They're coming for you." The shadows flickered, twisting around her like serpents, threatening to consume her again. "Emily, fight it!" I yelled, hands trembling as the figures advanced, a creeping tide of darkness eager to reclaim its lost prey. "You're stronger than this." But her words came tumbling out in spasms, entangled with the low, growling laughter of the creature outside, and I felt a freezing wave of dread penetrate my chest. "No, it's not too late. I can help." Her form quivered, caught in the tension of her struggle, and I recognized the dark pull trying to drag her back down, back into the suffocating cold. Instantly, I reached forward, illuminating her with my flashlight, offering her the warmth of my resolve. "Emily, you're not alone. We're together in this." As she looked at me, there was a flicker of recognition, a moment of clarity, as if she felt the connection through the dark haze that enshrouded her. I wanted to pull her back into our circle, to save her from the consuming fear. But with that moment of hope, another wave of shadows expanded ominously from the depths, enveloping her and blocking my light. "No! Stay back!" I shouted, panic surging through me as I turned to my friends. "We have to help her. We can't let them take her." But the shadows lunged, more ferocious now, a liquid tide of darkness spilling through the remnants of our barricades, claws and fingers reaching hungrily, consuming everything in their path, clawing at my thoughts, threatening to drag us all into the void. "Stay in formation," I yelled, desperation flooding my voice. The shadows surged forward, undulating like a malicious tide, raw hunger emanating from their dark forms as they clawed at the edges of our circle. My heart raced, pounding in my ears like the roar of a distant storm. The faces of my friends were twisted with fear, breath shallow as they clung tightly to the light, each flicker of strength threatening to go out like dying embers. Suddenly, I felt a sharp chill zip through the room, wind howling as if it carried the cries of untold souls. The lights flickered dangerously, shadows curling and twisting, casting grotesque shapes on the walls. I could hear the creatures whispering, each phrase a tendril of fear creeping into my mind. "You will join us soon," they hissed, their voices slithering like worms, burrowing in my skull, trying to drag me into the abyss. I took a step back, face clammy with a sweat that felt like ice. "We won't give up," I shouted, trying to rally my friends, though I could see their resolve beginning to falter. The room felt alive, the walls pulsing with the rhythm of fear, a heartbeat that synchronized with my own dread. Then, from the endless darkness streaming in, a figure emerged, tall and shadowy, indistinct at first, but slowly taking shape until I recognized it. It was Emily, but not the Emily I remembered. This one was hollow, her smile sharp and unnatural, eyes dull like stones pulled from a riverbed. She stood before us as if pulled from another realm, a tattered echo of our friend. "Help me," she pleaded, but the words dripped with an unsettling cadence that sent chills racing down my spine. "The darkness needs you. You can't fight it." I tried to move closer, my limbs feeling heavy, trapped in a quagmire of confusion and distress. "Emily, you have to fight it," I cried, but as I spoke, the shadows seemed to absorb my words, twisting them around like a sick joke. "You're stronger than they are." But I felt the edges of my resolve fraying. The shadows coiling around her body began to tighten, whispering secrets that rattled deep within my bones. "We're all waiting for you," they cooed, an eerie lullaby of dread that tugged at my soul. I felt the shadows brushing against my skin, icy tendrils reaching to siphon my strength, the dark telling me truths I feared might be real. "Don't listen," I hissed, voice trembling as I stepped back, urgency flowing through me. I could see the flicker of internal struggle in Emily's eyes, the battle between the remaining fragments of her spirit and the overwhelming darkness that sought to claim her completely. "You must push them away." But with every plea, she seemed to fade further, sinking deeper into the depths of the encroaching void. Shadows morphed into monstrous figures, their outlines flickering between reality and nightmare. Each swain of darkness carried faces I recognized, people lost, their expressions forever marred by despair and suffering. Panic surged through me as I scanned the crowd, seeing the expressions of my friends. Fear gnawed at their hearts as they watched Emily struggling against her shadowy bonds. "We can't let this happen," I yelled, seeing a few of them trembling, ready to give in to hopelessness. The very lights that had given us strength began to flicker, dimming unevenly like dying stars being swallowed by the void. The creature outside released a bone-chilling laugh, a symphony of malevolence that sliced through the silence, its dire intentions clear as it sought to manipulate our fears. "You can't resist me," it shrieked from the edges, its form shifting, countless dark motors swirling together to create a tempest of loose souls. "Join the ranks of the lost. You will find comfort in the darkness." I refused to let despair settle in my chest, feeling the cold tendrils wrap tighter around me. "Stay together," I shouted again, the words like a prayer against encroaching madness. With renewed adrenaline, I fished out every fragment of courage remaining, light glinting off metal as I brandished my flashlight, its beam a beacon against the consuming dark. But as I shone the light into the darkness where Emily stood, I felt my heart sink deeper. She was gone, swallowed by shadows, her cries replaced by a morose echo that resonated with my inner dread. "Don't leave us," I implored, anguish lacing through my voice as the shadows closed in around my friends, creeping with malicious intent. Suddenly, The temperature dropped violently, an unnatural cold that turned my breath visible like smoke. It wrapped around me, stealing warmth as the darkness seemed to thicken. I could barely breathe with the weight of despair, strangling hope, just as Emily's fading plea lingered in my mind. The space warped around us, walls bending and stretching like they were alive, the church transforming into a labyrinth of despair. My flashlight sputtered, almost extinguished by the sheer power of hopelessness saturating the air. I couldn't shake the feeling we were trapped in a nightmarish loop, swallowed up with each agonizing heartbeat. In my peripheral vision, I caught sight of one of my friends, Alex, his eyes wide, visibly trembling. "It's getting darker," he yelled, voice rising above the panic. But before I could respond, the shadows functioned as though they had minds of their own, rising like a tide to reinforce their attack. "Hold tight," I panted, gripping Alex's arm. The touch was a reminder of our reality, a tether in the endless void we confronted. Focus on the light we have. We can push back. But darkness swept through like a living nightmare, snuffing out our resolve. The church shuddered under the weight of despair, the shadows creeping closer, feeding on our terror. I felt a surge of dread clawing at my throat, threatening to choke me as the creatures unleashed a chorus of wails, pulling memories from the recesses of my mind. "Let me in," they whispered, voices mixed with familiar tones, coaxing words designed to pull me into the final depth of despair. They echoed with the sorrow of lost friends, tempting me with promises of peace if I relinquished my fight. "Join us. We are waiting." I staggered back, light flickering as the pressure of their voices clawed at my sanity. "No!" I screamed, fighting against the oppressive weight. "I won't listen to you." With every ounce of will left, I pushed the light forward, brightening my surroundings, an expulsion of hope, each beam a desperate defiance against their overwhelming presence. And then, a singular beam illuminated a distant corner of the church. A pulsing shadow loomed there, stronger than the others, swirling, a heart of darkness beating in time with the creature's malevolent laughter. It pulsed and rippled, as if waiting for the right moment to pounce. I turned to my friends, desperation clawing at my chest. "We need to take it out. That darkness is the source. If we fight together, we can end this." The others nodded, fear still etched in their eyes, but fueled by the flicker of determination. We took a step toward that shape, light magnifying with each step, forming a collective force that filled the air with a warmth strong enough to pierce through the suffocating cold. "On three," I whispered, gathering every ounce of conviction I could muster. "1, 2, 3. We charged forward, light beams converging into a single stream, and in that moment, I felt the air crackle with energy. The shadows hissed, enraged and fearful, a cacophony of distorted sounds swelling as we pressed deeper into the heart of the darkness. But it surged back, recoiling violently, twisting like smoke as it enfolded me in a suffocating cocoon. The air grew thick with a sense of impending doom, and I suddenly felt a paralyzing fear grip my heart as I fought to keep my focus. "Don't lose it," I shouted, words choking on the words of despair that echoed all around us. "Stay with me. We're almost there." The creature's laughter laughed harder, reverberating through the room with a brutality that made my skin crawl. "This is your end," it bellowed, and the shadows pressed in, trying to swallow me whole, taunting me with whispers of my deepest fears. "Fight it! Fight it!" My voice rang through the chaos, the mantra endlessly repeating in my head as I strained against the darkness that sought to overwhelm. I felt my connection to my friends drive the fear back with each harrowing step. Suddenly, as we pressed closer, a blinding flash erupted, momentarily illuminating creatures scurrying backwards, their forms flailing in a panic of their own creation. I could see the outlines of the creature and every horrid, twisted feature. "The light!" I yelled again. "Push it all together. We can seal the darkness forever." With renewed vigor, we concentrated our power, focusing every sheer will against the flesh of shadows. I could feel their resistance breaking beneath our collective strength as the shadows recoiled, shrieking in agony, almost laughing in despair, desperate to hold on to its last grasp upon us. And just as I thought we might overcome, a surge of darkness exploded forth, throwing me back like a rag doll. I hit the floor hard, dazed, a sickening dread threatening to swallow me whole. I gasped for breath, panic swelling, and glanced up to see my friends faltering, their lights dimming. The room darkened ominously, my heart pounding in rhythm to the pulses of terror surging through the shadows as they began claiming pieces of the room, growing larger, imposing. I fought to rise, breathless, and just as I regained my footing, the shadows surged forward again, wrapping around me, their icy fingers curling around my throat. The whispers turned into shrill screams, twisting my name like a knife, promising nothing but despair if I succumbed. "We will set you free," they hissed, their words cutting deeper than any blade. Why resist? You belong to the darkness. It clawed at my mind, attempting to pull me under, to lure me into its suffocating embrace. I felt walls closing in around me, every ounce of hope drained. But the thought of my friends' faces and the light that remained pushed against the crushing darkness in my heart. I fought back, a primal scream tearing through me, releasing the raw fear that had taken root, lighting the fire for the will to prevail. Stay with me? Fight back. And amidst the cries, I felt the light flicker on, a sudden flash igniting inside my chest as I screamed out a rallying cry. Together! In that moment, I saw the focus in my friends' eyes return, determination blooming as they raised the remaining beams of light as shields against the overpowering darkness. It was more than just an act of defiance. It was a rekindling of the strength we shared, a shared belief we could break through the dark. Ness once and for all. Push! I yelled, every ounce of my being merging with theirs. We can end this. The shadows writhed in agony, the walls shaking violently, a whirlwind of darkness spinning wildly as we forced the oppressive force back, purifying the room in an outburst of light so powerful it consumed the edges of my vision. Yes! I shouted, feeling the thrill of hope lift the burden of despair. But just as I felt a wave of victory surging through, the shadows erupted, unleashing their grip with a fury born of desperation. Not yet. My heart sank, the chaos intensifying as dark figures surged forward, reclaiming power, intertwining with another wave of shadows flooding the room. They spun wildly, encircling us relentlessly, battling against the light with vicious tenacity. I could hear the sound of their claws scraping against the floor, like nails on a chalkboard, a disturbing rhythm that signed their attempts to ensnare us again. My breath quickened, fear gripping my throat as I prepared for the worst, ready to fight until my last breath. Stay strong, I urged, my voice rising over the din, echoing with a ferocious resolve. We've come this far. We can't give in now. But the unyielding onslaught continued, waves of shadows crashing against us, undulating with fierce energy as they enveloped me, making every corner of my mind scream in agony. Each flicker of light felt like a signal of distress, a clarity amidst the dense fog of dread. In the swirling mass, I glimpsed the creature in its true form, a manifestation of all my fears, malice radiating from it like a black sun. It loomed above, cloaked in a shroud of darkness that made it seem all-seeing, all-knowing, every pulse of its form echoing my heartache. No! I cried out, drowning in despair, but digging deep within to pull from the last threads of hope. We are stronger than your darkness. The room shook with the force of my declaration, but it was swallowed almost instantly by the waves of shadows closing in. An icy tendril brushed against my arm, sending shockwaves of panic spiraling through my entire being. I could feel the malice wrapping tighter around me, squeezing until it felt like my lungs might collapse. Fear charged the atmosphere, crackling like static, urging me to give in to hopelessness. As I rallied my energy, The entity above me flickered, its form shifting with horrifying fluidity, becoming a visage I thought I'd forgotten. "You can't escape," it whispered, the sound oozing into my mind like sludge. "You belong with us. You belong in the dark." Images flashed across my vision, pictures of moments when my heart ached with sorrow, moments I had buried deep in my memories, faces I had lost, regrets that crawled back to haunt me. My mind splintered under the weight of those memories, threatening to unravel the fragile strands of my resolve. "No," I whispered to myself, rage surging. "Not again." I fought against the invasive thoughts, but the shadows wrapped around me, drawing out every bit of strength I had, every flicker of bravery dimming under the weight of despair. With gritted teeth and trembling limbs, I locked my gaze on my friends, their expressions a reflection of my own fear, but also a determination I desperately clung onto. "Don't give in," I shouted, my voice breaking through the chaos like a beacon in darkness. The tide of shadows pulsed, sensing our defiance, seeming to writhe and swell with anger. A grotesque roar filled the air, an echo that rattled my bones and ignited primal instincts to flee. "You will all join in eternal darkness." The very ground shook as its voice bled into our souls, sending ripples of fright. I turned to the other side, trying to find some hint of strength in the chaos. My flashlight, my only weapon, flickered and dimmed, reflecting my waning hope, the expression of light going out as the shadows surged closer. The clamor grew, swirling around us, claws whispering through the air like the slithering of snakes, hissing every suppressed fear back into my mind. And then I saw it, the flicker of a light against the very edge of reason. It wasn't my flashlight, though. It was something more vibrant, a raw purity of energy pulsing deep within the darkness around me. A portal, perhaps, a chance to escape this nightmare. I felt drawn to it, but the shadows clawed at me, furious tendrils gripping my legs, trying to drag me back into the void. "Fight it!" I screamed, feeling the shadows pulling me down, desperate to swallow my soul whole. I fought to lift my flashlight, pouring every ounce of will into the beam. In a final, desperate act, I hurled it towards the light. The moment the flashlight struck the mysterious glow, everything seemed to suspend in time. An explosion of luminescence erupted, dispersing the shadows momentarily, revealing faces twisted in anguish and despair, souls either lost to the darkness or tormented in ways I never thought possible. But the glimpse of light was fleeting, and the shadows rippled in furious revenge. They surged back with renewed ferocity, the sickening chill intensifying as they consumed the space between my friends and me. I glanced around, terror surging in the pit of my stomach, seeing their lights sputter and swirl erratically around the gathering tempest. I needed a plan, a clear strategy to fight back against this wretched tide. "We have to focus together," I shouted, desperate for any semblance of unity amongst the chaos. "Stand your ground. Remember what we came for." Their faces locked onto mine, hope mingling with despair, and for a moment, the flicker of light returned to their eyes. Together we formed a line, trembling yet determined, pooling our shared strength against the overwhelming force. The shadows shrieked, a banshee wail that was almost human, striking a chord of unease deep in my psyche. It twisted, surged, and split apart. The dark formed a massive shape, a grotesque caricature of our collective fears, looming and swirling with intentions darker than night itself. "You think you can defeat me?" it boomed, and even through the storm of shadows, I could sense its glee. "I will feast on your darkness." The creature lunged, arms stretching impossibly long, fingers sharp and jagged. I braced myself, but it was too quick, creeping toward me faster than I could react. Then it froze, a heartbeat away, a pressure breaking against my skin like an invisible wall. In that moment of horror, the realization hit me. I was being drawn into the fear, the darkness threatening to swallow my very essence. I forced myself to think of light, of laughter shared with friends before all this began, memories sparking a rebellion inside. As I focused, something inside shifted. The light dimly flickering in the shadows began to pulse with a heartbeat of its own. "We won't give in," I declared, feeling the warmth return to our circle. I took a step forward, feeling strength in numbers. Together we shine brighter. With renewed energy, we fused our lights into a single beam, illuminating the suffocating darkness. The shadows hesitated, recoiling as the intensity of our collective light surged. "You think you can resist?" It thundered, voice cracking like thunder over a storm, but we were already advancing. In that blinding moment, I felt the shadows reeling, the distorted faces hissing and clawing at each other, their terror becoming palpable. I locked eyes with Alex, whose determination mirrored mine, igniting the embers of hope we so desperately needed. "Now!" I shouted, and together we charged forward, light spilling from us like a blazing inferno, determined to burn through the dark. The shadows writhed, tangling together in a desperate attempt to weave a barrier against our charge. But we were faster, stronger, each advance making them shudder like leaves caught in a storm. But just as victory seemed within our grasp, the creature unleashed a guttural roar, sending a wave of dark energy crashing towards us like a torrential downpour. It felt like a physical force, slamming into me, tearing at the fabric of my resolve. "Don't let go!" I stumbled, reeling against the onslaught, but I could feel my strength waning as the darkness sought to wrap around my spirit, pulling me into its depths once more. Desperation clawed at my throat, sweet whispers beckoning into the abyss, painting promises of peace if only I would surrender. But I wouldn't. I couldn't. Not now. Not when so many lives were at stake. "Fight! Fight!" The words spilled from me, raw and primal, urging my friends to hold their ground as the shadows raged around us. The energy coalesced, an uprising from deep within our chests, rising together to form an unyielding force, the brightness swelling into an unbreakable shield. I could see it now, a radiant energy pulsing in sync with the beat of my heart, our hopes interwoven, stronger than despair. "Push forward!" I yelled, desperation morphing into rage as I thrust my arm ahead, nailing the creature with the beam of light. The shadows recoiled, fraying at the edges until they whipped back, shrieking a haunting wail that chilled me to my core. The fabric of reality wavered, shadows liquefying, crashing against one another in a whirlpool of faces. Those lost, those taken, every nightmare spiraling out in a frenzy. It was all coming to a head, chaos reaching a boiling point as light and shadow collided with primal intensity. In the heart of that turmoil, something shifted. I could feel cracks forming in the dark, breaking apart like dying stars. And as I looked around desperately, searching for the last pieces of hope to kindle, my eyes locked onto Emily's spirit shimmering among the chaos, a beacon among the storm. "Come on, Em!" I screamed, reaching deeper into the tempest. "You can break free. You are not lost." Her features pulsed, clarity seeping through the shadow as she struggled against the chains binding her to the dark. For a moment, her eyes shone bright, a reflection of the light fighting beside me. "I remember," she cried, her voice resonating through the chaos, lifting the weight of despair from my shoulders. With that realization, a comet of light shot through, our combined energies igniting, the overwhelming brightness blinding the shadows. Emily took a step forward, light spilling off her like a raging wave. "I'm coming with you," she shouted, and together we surged forward, light crashing through the darkest heart of the storm, pulsing with energy, igniting hope that spiraled out in all directions. The shadows screamed, twisting into unfathomable shapes desperate to cling to their last grip on reality, the sound reverberating like the echoes of 1,000 tormented souls. Gripping hands and light merged to drive the darkness back, chipping away at the core. But even that victory felt uncertain. I could feel remnants of the dark crawling back, seeking to snuff out the light we had uncovered. The shadows surged again, determined to reclaim what they considered their own. Not yet. Each flicker of the light trembled under the strength of their despair. I fought against it, battling to hold on, channeling every flicker of strength within me into a singular purpose. Fight. We are stronger. The words blazed in my heart, spilling from my lips like fire as I threw everything I had into pushing the brightness forward. With every ounce of fear transformed into energy, we charged as one, overwhelming shadows curling and twisting around us like smoke being sucked into the void. The darkness writhed, screeching as if challenged by the brightness coursing through, scattering into tendrils, lost in our glorious onslaught. And just as it felt we wouldn't be able to inch forward, a crack split the darkness. Light burst forth, devastating everything in its path. A crescendo of brilliance sending shockwaves that lit the entire church. For a moment, everything was silent, and I gasped, stunned as shadows dissolved into sparks, disappearing like vapor lost to the wind. The pulsing form of the creature exploded into a kaleidoscope of light, a final desperate wail as it unraveled entirely, revealing nothing but brilliant hues behind. In the wake of that devastation, I stood panting, my heart racing. My friends clustered around me, their faces bearing marks of fear, but also dawning relief as brighter than ever beams spread across the once dim sanctuary. And in the heart of that awakening, there was Emily, her spirit afire with newfound energy, finally free from the chains that bound her. We did it, she breathed, her voice almost a whisper, yet it resonated with a joyful vibrance as she glowed. I felt tears prick my eyes at what we had achieved. We're not done yet, I said, catching my breath, turning my gaze towards the remnants of the darkness, still lurking in the corners, still whispering with fury. Even though we had prevailed for now, I sensed it wasn't finished. The shadows lurked still, biding their time, seeing us as remnants of their next opportunity. We must seal it for good, I continued, adrenaline still coursing through me. We have to be ready. The air shimmered, familiar faces struggling out from the corners of my memory, the sense of dread lingering. But I knew now we were not alone. We had forged a light strong enough to fist against the dark again and again. With renewed conviction, we steadied ourselves once more, poised for whatever might come next. Together, I whispered, determination infusing my voice. And then, with unity thrumming between us like an untamed pulse, we prepared for what the darkness may unleash next. The air felt heavier, like a thick fog rolling in over the land, chilling to the bone. I could sense it lurking beyond the edges of our light, tendrils slithering in the shadows, coiling tighter around us like a hunter getting ready to pounce. It was watching, waiting, and deep inside I knew this wasn't the end. I glanced at my friends, their faces painted with worry, but also a flicker of hope. We needed to keep this light alive, to anchor our resolve against the encroaching darkness. But as I stood there on the brink, unease settled over me like a blanket of ice. The wind howled through the shattered windows, and with the sound came whispers, low and insistent, intertwining with my very thoughts. Leave. This is not your place. They echoed through the room, getting deeper and louder, reverberating like a dark chant. Shivers crawled down my spine. I looked back at my friends, searching their faces for reassurance, but I could see the shadows of doubt starting to creep into their eyes. Stay focused, I urged, forcing my voice to stay steady. We can't let it take us. But even as the words left my mouth, I felt the heavy sensation of despair wrapping around my heart. The shadows surged forward, growing denser, pooling together in a swirling mass, twisting into grotesque shapes that seemed to laugh at our resolve. It's feeding on our fear, I shouted, and they seemed to hear me, though the whispers taunted back, your light will fade. You cannot last. The shadows began to shift and morph, forming figures that looked eerily familiar. Faces I recognized from the past, some long lost. No! I cried, staggering back as the resemblance became clearer. They wore expressions of anguish, eyes hollowed and mouths forming silent screams. My heart raced as I faced the memories I thought I had buried, the pain bubbling to the surface like a festering wound. "This isn't real," I insisted, shaking my head, gripping the edges of my light. But the shadows laughed louder, their twisted faces circling me, whispering promises of despair, summoning up every darkest memory, the ones that made my insides twist. "You want to forget," they hissed, "but we are always here, lurking beneath the surface, waiting to pull you back down." A jolt of fear struck me, the very essence of doubt invading my mind, and for a second, I faltered. I could see the faces of the people I had lost, moments when I had failed. Each one was a blade to my soul, each voice a reminder that I was never really free from the shadows. I tried to pull my thoughts away, to summon the light. "Fight! Remember why we're here!" I shouted again, forcing the words through the mounting darkness, but the figures swirled closer, merging into one massive shadow that towered over me, its whisper a hiss like dry leaves rustling in a dying wind. Suddenly, a gust of wind blasted through the room, scattering the shadows and pushing the figures back slightly. I took a cautious breath, feeling the pulse of my friends beside me like a lifeline tethering me to reality. They took hold, pushing against the fear that gripped us all, and I felt a flicker of hope ignite. But in an instant, the light flickered as the shadows lunged again, crashing like a wave over us. I stumbled back, darkness swirling around me, and I was suddenly alone in the void. The familiar faces dissolved, but their anguish still echoed in the depths of my mind, and darkness wrapped around my throat like a vice. "This is your fate," it taunted, "to drain and drown in the endless night." The cold crept into my bones, and my breath caught painfully in my throat. I could feel myself sinking, visions of failure swirling endlessly. I wanted to scream, but my voice faded in this void. Ghostly hands reached out, pulling me deeper into the shadows, their chilling touch threatening to snuff out the last flicker of my light. Then I remembered the warmth of my friends, the light we had shared, and it sparked a flicker of rebellion deep within me. I concentrated fiercely, grasping onto the memory of laughter, of shared moments amid the chaos. It surged through my chest, igniting the flame of hope again. "No!" I yelled with every shred of strength I had left. "You cannot have me." With that proclamation, the darkness hesitated, features rippling. I focused my energy, channeling everything into my friends, feeling them close by, creating a wall against the encroaching despair. Darkness technically loomed around me, but I wouldn't let it consume me. And then, with an abrupt surge, a blinding light exploded, radiant and blaring, shattering the heavy air. It poured out from the center of our gathering, an unwavering beacon against the shadows. With renewed clarity, I could see the shadows flinch, squirming back under the onslaught of pure energy. "Hold on!" I cried, rallying us together, urging every flicker of light to connect. We could do this if we fought together. The shadows screeched, their twisted forms contorting as our light washed over them. The air buzzed with energy, the darkness disintegrating under the pressure of our united light. I could see hints of shadow-clad entities fading into nothingness, screams ringing as they were cast out. But even as they fell, I could feel the heavy presence lurking still, waiting in the edges, patient like a predator. I sensed the creature rebuilding itself within the shadows, rage burning in its essence, fighting against us. "We're not done yet," I shouted, determined to keep pushing forward. I could feel the weight of its gaze on us, the sinister intent glimmering as it coiled closer, slamming against the barriers we had created. "This is just the beginning," it shrieked, an echo that rattled the sanctuary. "I will consume you all." The ground beneath us shook violently as the shadows surged again, launching toward us in a cacophony of darkness and despair. I could see the flickers of fear in my friends' eyes returning, but I refused to let that overcome us. "Hold tight!" I roared, lighting the air with our collective resolve, signaling our unity against the encroaching storm. But the darkness was relentless, and as I braced for the impact, I could hear the whispers of the shadows weaving around me, tending to fears deep within, promising pestilence, anguish, and isolation if I would only let go. They tugged at my mind, unraveling the threads of my conviction. "You can't win," they hissed, the tones sharp as knives. The walls of the sanctuary warped and twisted, shadows clawing at the edges, almost as if the very structure were alive, wanting to swallow everything whole. All around me, panic began setting in as images of us fading into the gray crept into my thoughts, doubts festering. Was it true? What if we were just prolonging the inevitable? But even as the dread clawed at my heart, I remembered the strength of our unity, how together we fought against this haunting nightmare. With my resolve hardening, I ground out a breath and pressed my mind. "We are light," I bellowed, feeling every fiber in my being ignite. "And we will not falter." With that renewed conviction, I thrust my hands forward, weaving the energy we had charged as one, the light radiating outward, pushing against the tide of shadows, scorching through the darkness that engulfed us. "This ends now," I declared, my voice echoing through the dark as the shadows screamed, clawing backward against our united light. They began to dissolve, twisting into mist before disappearing entirely. But even in that moment of triumph, I could feel the presence of the main creature lurking, waiting to strike back, and as I turned my head sharply, regret washed through me. "It's not over," I murmured, the dread clawing back to the forefront. Even as we fought, I could sense the truth lurking beneath the surface of our victory. The shadows could retreat, yes, but they were still there, feeding off doubt, feeding off fear, just waiting for a moment of weakness. Tremors radiated through the sanctuary, the energy shifting as I braced myself, knowing we had to stand vigilant. The remaining darkness loomed, weaving in and out of our light, whispering blasphemous lies. Words of despair resurfaced. "You are nothing. You are weak." With that realization, I tightened my grip, and I could see my friends steeling themselves beside me, a united front against the encroaching tide. "Stay strong. We have to believe." The shadows formed a wall, a thick barrier cutting us off from the light flickering at the edges of the room. It felt like the entire world had tilted off its axis, and I swayed, trying to keep my balance, but the darkness clawed at my feet like tentacles, dragging me down. I forced the light into a radiant beam, extending my arms outward. "Now!" I screamed, and we surged forward again, arms linked, hoping the light could break through the inky blackness before us. In unison, we chanted, our voices rising above the din. "We are light. We will prevail." With a tremendous pulse, the energy swirled, washing over the channel of shadows like a bright wave crashing over a silent shore, the release echoing through the walls like a thunderclap. The shadows shrieked in abject rage, swirling into a vortex of chaos and fury. But with the power of our connection, the beam held firm. I could feel the darkness sputter, flickering like a dying candle. The bond we shared fortified me against the whispering temptation to give in. And at that moment, I saw their twisted forms clear, a collective swirl of their regret and malice, flickering and fading like ashes in the wind. But I also felt it, the shifting weight in the air, potent and malevolent, as the entity grew desperate amidst its unraveling despair. "You cannot win against the dark," it howled, its voice splintering, the anger crackling like lightning. With every ounce of conviction, I grasped the truth of our shared light, the birthright that surged within us, glaring into the abyss. "We will not bow to darkness," I cried out, pushing ahead. The shadows blazed, a final, frenzied assault that clashed against us. This was it, our ultimate stand against the embodiment of fear. Knowing the odds were stacked against us, I steeled my heart, gathering my friends closer, feeling their warmth pulsing with life amidst the suffocating chaos. And then, with a collective surge of power and light, we thrust our hands forward, radiating every last ounce of energy we possessed, lighting up the room once more. The shadows writhed in horror, bending and distorting like a broken reflection on shattered glass. As the overwhelming brightness cracked through the dark, I saw for the first time the true shape of the darkness we had been fighting. It was a swirling mass of pain, regret, and fear, all swirling in a grotesque dance. The darkness recoiled, trembling, not knowing where to flee. In that pivotal moment, we had the choice to soften our light or to harness the glow until the very heart of the shadows disintegrated into nothingness. "Finish this," I shouted, anchoring our strength, and I felt the chorus of my friends rising behind me in unwavering harmony. With one last surge, we broke the barrier, the light consuming the dark with relentless energy. Beneath the pressure of our vibrant unity, the dark shriveled back, tearing at itself like a collapsing star, gasping for breath as if it had never encountered such force before. And just as it seemed the darkness might seize a final moment, it shattered, dissolving into a kaleidoscope of flickers that faded into the light. All at once, the sanctuary shuddered, and silence enveloped us like a welcoming hug. We stood there, in the aftermath, trembling but alive, disbelief coursing through our veins as the last traces of darkness faded into the void. I took a deep breath, the sweet taste of freedom settling over me like a warm blanket. But as I looked at my friends, the eerie feeling of something being unfinished crept back. Even as the last echoes of the shadows faded, a chilling thought lingered. What if this was merely a temporary reprieve? What if the darkness was waiting somewhere in the corners of our minds, lurking for a moment of weakness? Suddenly, a low whisper echoed around us, wrapping its cold fingers around my throat. It slithered through the stillness, a fleeting sound that felt like ice trickling down my back. "You think you're free?" it hissed, laced with malice. The hair on my arm stood on end as I scanned the corners of the sanctuary, heart pounding in my chest. I could feel my friends stiffen beside me, their eyes darting around, searching for the source of that dreadful voice. "What was that?" one of them breathed, and I could see the fear creeping back into their expressions like a creeping fog. I struggled to shake off the sense of dread that was clawing its way into my mind. The shadows had retreated, yes, but something remained stifling the air, like remnants of a storm that refused to pass. "Ignore it," I urged, trying to solidify my grip on the moment. "It's just the echoes of what we fought. We must stay strong." But those words felt hollow, quickly swallowed by the growing unease. The whispers swelled again, louder now, overlapping like a symphony of torment. "You cannot escape your fate. You are mine." I took a step back, instinctively toward my friends, but the sense of isolation began to seep over me like gray clouds, suffocating and oppressive. I could feel my resolve wavering, doubts creeping back into the edges of my mind, each whisper digging up memories buried deep in my thoughts. "Look at what you've lost," the voices murmured, and suddenly I was flooded with visions, faces of the people from my past, their anguished eyes peering through the darkness, beckoning me to join them. They seemed to sway, caught in a vortex of despair, fingers outstretched in an eternal wail. "You can't fight what you are." My breath hitched. "No!" I shouted back at the shadows, desperate to break free from their grip, but their cold tendrils wrapped tighter, ensnaring my will, drawing me into the sea of regret. I wrestled against the vision, but every loss hit like a hammer, each painful memory clawing back to the surface, threatening to drown me. "You'll never be whole," it taunted as the figures began to shimmer, their faces morphing into grotesque parodies of the people I loved. "Let us guide you back into the dark. Embrace the nothingness." A nauseating wave of fear crashed over me. I stumbled forward, seeking the warmth of my friends, needing their strength more than ever. "Don't listen. We are not alone," I urged, even as my voice trembled under the weight of uncertainty. In defiance, I pushed against the oppressive weight of despair, forcing my eyes to meet the dark mass that still clung to the edges of the sanctuary. The air shimmered, heavy with tension, the shadows swirling nervously as if sensing my struggle. Then, in that moment of hesitation, I spotted a flicker of movement just beyond the light. A figure emerged, wreathed in shadow, but unmistakably real. It seemed to float just at the edge of my vision, darting away every time I tried to focus on it. I felt my heart leap into my throat. "What's that?" I managed to say, pointing a trembling finger toward the lurking shape. My friends followed my gaze, their eyes widening in shock. "It's watching us." The figure seemed to pulse with the shadows, flickering as it danced just beyond the edges of our light. I took a hesitant step forward, the urge to confront it battling with the instinct to flee. The closer I got, the more profound and suffocating the darkness became. I could feel it seeping into my skin, chilling me to the core. Just then, the voices erupted in hysterical laughter, deafening in their fury. "You think you can uncover the truth?" they screeched. "What lies ahead is far worse than this." The shadows writhed, swirling like a tempest, threatening to swallow everything whole. I hesitated. The air crackled with energy, and I could feel the walls beginning to close in. I swallowed hard, my gaze still penetrating the dark figure. "What do you want?" I shouted, somewhere between defiance and dread, hoping my voice would reach whoever or whatever lay within that smothering darkness. The figure paused, swirling slightly, its form becoming more defined yet still obscured by an inky veil. "Do you not recognize me?" it hissed, voice slithering in like a thief in the night. I squinted, trying to see past the shadows, the tension building as I sensed something familiar in the depth of its eyes that glimmered like white-hot coals. You should not be here." My realization came in a breath, a cold knot forming in the pit of my stomach. It was whispering my name now, wrapping around it with a chilling familiarity. In that moment, dread washed over me like a tidal wave, and the memories came flooding back. Flashes of a past I tried so hard to forget. A figure I had lost, a soul drifting in the void for too long. I was left behind. It crooned, and the shadows behind it shifted and pulsed, each beat matching the racing tempo of my heart. The entity lunged forward, and the darkness trembled, reaching to grasp me, fingers cold as ice. My friends cried out, instinctively drawing closer together, but I was rooted to the spot, fear anchoring me solid. "You can't chase away your past," it screamed, the echo reverberating through the sanctuary, twisting the very fabric of reality around me. I wanted to run, but felt a magnetic pull drawing me deeper, the shadows trying to weave around my feet like chains. In that instant, something cracked within me, a fissure of resolve. I gasped, summoning every ounce of strength, every memory of light and laughter that had flickered in the corners of my mind. "You are not my past," I bellowed, channeling the emotions I had locked away. Desire surged forth, like fire igniting within my soul. "You don't own me." Those words tore from my lips, more manifesto than plea, slicing through the veil of fear. The dark figure hesitated, the shadows swirling around it as if caught in an unseen storm, laughter faltering for just a moment. But even as it wavered, I knew it wouldn't be defeated so easily. "You can't silence what you truly are," it shrieked, the shadowy walls vibrating at the edge of my vision. I willed my hands to glow with the light we had forged together, disappointment, pain, and the bonding of friendship swirling into a crescendo of brilliance. "No one can take my light," I shouted, thrusting my palms forward. As I did, waves of energy exploded from the point of contact, casting a glow over everything like dawn breaking through the darkest night. The brilliance washed over the dark figure, illuminating its twisted visage, revealing the truth hidden in the chaos. "This ends here," I cried, acceptance flooding through me. The shadows jerked and twisted, unable to withstand the intensity, but they howled still, pushing against the light, desperate but powerless. The sanctuary seemed to convulse, walls trembling in response to the battle unfolding before us. But I wouldn't relent. The shadows writhed and contorted, faces twisting in torment, mesmerized by the light that fought to banish them. Glimmers of hope sparkled in my mind, Images of standing together with my friends, of joy and laughter reverberating through the darkness. I felt their belief surging through me, entwined with my own, and I howled into the void, summoning it forth. "Stand with me," I bellowed, feeling my voice become a rallying cry. And in that moment of shared strength, a torrent of light exploded from the center of our circle, expanding like a supernova, illuminating the entire sanctuary. The dark figure recoiled, its anguished screeches drowning in the radiance, twisting and writhing. Shadows dissipated, struggling against the power that consumed it, desperate to grasp at the remnants of despair. Yet I felt the pressure of darkness still lingering in the corners, clawing, grasping, lurking. "This is merely the beginning," they spat, a sound like breaking glass. "You may win today, but this fight is eternal." But I stood steadfast, anchored by the warmth of friendship, fueled by the undeniable thrumming of light beneath my skin. "Let it come," I declared. "We're ready." And as the remaining shadows swirled around me, I felt a chill deep within, a promise simmering, a reminder that fear is a tether we break together. "This isn't over," I whispered under my breath, knowing within that the darkness, though resisted today, would always linger in the liminal depths of the unknown, waiting for the moment when I would falter again. But not today. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and faced the darkness anew. And I will not face it alone. And as the remaining shadows swirled around me, I felt a chill deep within, a promise simmering, a reminder that fear is a tether we break together. "This isn't over," I whispered under my breath, knowing within that the darkness, though resisted today, would always linger in the liminal depths of the unknown, waiting for the moment when I would falter again. But not today. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and faced the darkness anew. And I will not face it alone. Yet, even as those words left my lips, a sense of foreboding washed over me. The shadows stirred violently, as if summoned by my determination. They twisted and turned, taking on grotesque forms that flickered like broken reflections in a shattered mirror. Their faces morphed into snarling rages, each one a visceral reminder of my own fears and failures. I felt the weight of their gazes, the crushing anger that they directed toward me, suffocating and ominous. "You think bravery can change what you are?" One of the shadows hissed, its voice curdling my blood. I recognized that voice. It was a whisper from my past, echoing through the halls of my mind. Memories of failure and abandonment flashed through me, moments I thought I had buried forever. I clutched my head, the shadows pressing in with the heat of fury, eager to unearth every regret and twist my heart again. "You can't escape the truth," they chanted, a chorus of despair mingling with laughter, their mocking words turning my triumph to ash. I staggered back, uncertainty swirling within me, each heartbeat screaming to retreat, to find safety away from their seething presence. But my friends stood firm beside me, their eyes wide but resolute, shimmering with the same light we had wielded against the dark. "Don't let it get to you," one shouted, trying to bolster my dwindling courage. I knew they were right. "You're nothing but a reflection of my fears," I yelled back, forcing the words out like a spell meant to bind the shadows. The voices shivered at my words, hesitant for a heartbeat, but then they surged forward, an unholy tide, the air heavy with malice. The shadows split, revealing a dark chasm behind them, an abyss that beckoned me closer. I felt its call, the lure of isolation promising safety from the pain of confrontation. And then I saw it. A monstrous shape began to emerge, a grotesque figure cloaked in a swirling void. It was like watching a nightmare unfurl, a body formed not of flesh but of despair, with palpable tendrils that reached for me, twisting through the air like serpents of black smoke. "Join us," it hissed, voice eerily soft, almost soothing, as it extended a hand that seemed to promise release from the weight of my struggles. "You can give in, drift away, and leave the pain behind." I could feel the pull, drawing me closer, wrapping around my heart like a vine intent on squeezing out every last flicker of light. My friends cried out, but their voices felt distant, muffled by the seductive whisper of the darkness. "You see? You are alone," the figure taunted, its presence swelling to fill the sanctuary, suffocating and stifling the light we had fought so hard to create. "No one can help you. No one will save you from yourself." Cold dread clawed at my throat, but a flicker of defiance ignited deep within me. "You lie," I shouted, forcing every ounce of strength into my voice, the sound echoing through the enveloping dark. "I am not alone. We are stronger together." At that moment, my friends gathered close, forming a cage of unity around me. Suddenly, the shadows recoiled, their form wavering, and I could see the flickering tendrils pulse with uncertainty. "What is this?" they hissed, confusion sullying their anger. I took a step forward, emboldened by the strength radiating from my friends, the light pulsing like a heartbeat. "We are light. We will not be consumed," I bellowed, raising my hands high, forcing the energy to swell and flow between us, a surge of brightness that pushed back the creeping darkness. And then it happened. The figure screamed, a sound so chilling it paralyzed my senses, and the shadows writhed violently, recoiling from the force of our unity. Finally, I felt a shift, a crack in their dark facade. No, the shadows rang out in a chaotic symphony of rage and despair, their shapes distorting and breaking apart before my eyes. "We will return. You cannot hold us back forever." As the darkness began to dissolve, I stepped forward, my heart pounding, not entirely sure what would happen next. In its uproar, I glimpsed something floating within its depths, a glimmer of something precious and lost. With one final, desperate act, I reached into the shadows, extending my hand into the churning abyss. "I will reclaim what you have taken," I cried, reaching for the flicker of light that pulsed dimly amidst the chaos. The shadows screamed louder, desperation fueling their rage, but I pressed on, feeling the warmth push against me, urging me to pull it free. Suddenly, a bright flash shot through the darkness, illuminating the sanctuary once more. The figure faltered, momentarily distracted. In that precious second, I felt the warmth surge into my fingers, and I gripped it tightly, pulling with every ounce of power I had left. The moment it broke free, a blinding beam shot forth, illuminating every corner of the sanctuary, washing away the darkness like water, erasing footprints in the sand. The shadows screeched in agony, their forms distorting and evaporating, their darkness swallowed by the brilliant burst of light. I could see my friends shield themselves from the onslaught of energy, yet their eyes shone bright with encouragement. But even as the last remnants of darkness gave way, something deep within still prickled, a lingering echo that whispered ominously at the edges of my thoughts. "You may have won this battle," a voice crooned quietly, almost tenderly, "but the war is far from over." A chill snaked its way back into the sanctuary, and I felt a lingering shadow slither through the cracks of our hard-won light, like a desperate ghost seeking solace. The atmosphere thickened, as if the very air had turned stagnant, weighing heavily on my chest. I turned quickly to my friends, panic rising within me as I searched their faces, each mirrored reflection capturing the same uncertainty. "Did you hear that?" I gasped, my voice hoarse, the thrill of victory swiftly overshadowed by fear. They nodded, eyes wide and unblinking, scanning the edges of our sanctuary. In that tense silence, shadows began to gather again, not in the form of the monstrous entity we had bested, but a whispering chorus of echoes, crawling back to life in slow, deliberate tendrils. The whispers grew louder, slithering through the silence, filled with threats and doubts, mingling with the light like venom. Each syllable dripped with malice, slithering through every crevice, demanding to be heard. "You will never escape the darkness of your own making," they hissed, a cold shiver threading down my spine, much sharper than before. "We are always watching. We are always waiting, A sense of despair crashed over me once more, reality warping as the shadows hardened, merging into a colossal figure, looming ominously. I tightened my grip on my friend's hands. We won't give in. We fought too hard to let go now. They squeezed back, their allegiance burning bright, bolstering my own waning trust. Yet, as the whispers crescendoed into a cacophony, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't done. The darkness had simply retreated, lying in wait like a coiled serpent. You may have chased us away for now, one of the shadows whispered, voice so close I could feel the cold breath against my ear. But we will find a way back. We will unravel every thread of your courage. My heart pounded in my chest as I faced the looming presence. Despair threatened to pierce my heart. Yet within me, an ember of defiance flickered, the soft warmth of solidarity, reminding me that I was not alone. We will be ready, I promised, feeling that determination echo back from my friends. And as the shadows receded, fading into the edges of the dim room, a heavy silence replaced their cacophony. Yet, I couldn't shake the sensation that our peace held the weight of uncertainty. Looking at my friends, I knew we'd have to prepare, not just for a fight, but for what it truly meant to keep the darkness at bay. Because in that moment, as I glanced out into the shifting shadows, I realized the truth. There could be no victory without its challenges lurking just beneath the surface. Only time would tell when the shadows would return, and I felt a pit deep in my instincts, knowing that they wouldn't come alone. The silence in the sanctuary felt heavy, almost tangible, like a creature lying in wait. I dared to breathe, my lungs tight, as fear wound its way around my chest. What now? My voice came out shaky, echoing the uncertainty that gnawed at my insides. My friends exchanged glances, their expressions swirling with doubt and determination. Then the air shifted, thickening like a fog. The light that had filled our space dimmed, leaving behind shadows that clung to the corners with an almost sentient hunger. Those dark forms pulsed and radiated with menace, squirming like live beasts eager for a hunt. Instinctively, I stepped closer to my friends, feeling the rush of blood in my veins, electrified with the knowledge that something was approaching, something far worse than before. We have to stay strong, together, I urged, even as the dread crawled further under my skin. But just as I finished speaking, a sudden gust of wind swept through the room, extinguishing our small source of light and plunging us into absolute darkness. I gasped, my pulse quickening as panic wrapped itself around my throat. "Stay together," I shouted, my voice just a whisper in the void, but I felt their hands gripping mine, grounding me, keeping me from floating away into the abyss. Moments stretched into stilted eternity, the only sound my own ragged breathing, a reminder of the flesh and blood that threatened to unravel amid the tension. Then came the whispers again, low and slithering, like shadows disembodied from their masters. "Why do you resist?" they hissed, each word curdling my blood like a chilling fog descending over a graveyard. "You know you are trapped." I turned, hoping to see something, anything that might bring the anxiety to a halt. But all I could make out were forms shifting in the dark, their movements predatory and chaotic, and I felt as though 1,000 eyes watched, endlessly scrutinizing. "Face it, this is your reality," the voices crooned softly, wrapping around me like vines, pulling me toward surrender. "You are nothing without the darkness." I shook my head, fighting back the cold tendrils that crept into my thoughts. "I would rather be nothing than be a part of you," I yelled, desperation fueling my words even as they came out ragged and sharp. The whispers grew louder, agitated, feeding on my fear, and then came the sound, a soft, bone-chilling thud, almost like a heartbeat, echoing from the depths of the darkness. With every thud, an unbearable weight bore down on me, pressing in from all sides as the shadows thickened around us, morphing into a swirling vortex, the scent of decay filling the air. I swallowed hard. "What is that?" I gasped, pulling my friends closer. One of them, shaking, managed to respond. It's coming." A A flash, like lightning splitting the night, illuminated our surroundings for a brief moment, and I caught a glimpse of something moving. A figure shrouded in shadow, its features obscured but undeniably drawing nearer. Panic spiraled within me as I gripped my friend's hands tighter, trying to ground us against the tide of encroaching dread. "Get back!" I shouted, my voice trembling but firm, desperate to maintain our fragile hold against the encroaching terror. But the figure didn't listen. It loomed larger with every thudding heartbeat, its presence filling the space between us like a void trying to pull everything into itself. I could see glimmers of shiny eyes, each one reflecting my fear, 1,000 mirrors capturing my vulnerability. "You can't resist the call of the dark," it breathed, the words rolling out like fog curling across a graveyard floor. Suddenly, the darkness twisted, and out from the swirling mass shot tendrils, elongated and grotesque, reaching for us like the gnarled fingers of a desperate creature. My heart raced as I ducked, barely avoiding one as it slashed through the air, slicing through the emptiness with an ominous whoosh. "Run!" I screamed, adrenaline igniting my limbs as I pushed my friends forward, urging them away from the encroaching shadows, spiraling chaos consuming the ground beneath us. As we stumbled together, the air charged with desperation, I could feel the shadows tightening around us, pressing in like a vice, laughter echoing from somewhere beyond the veil. "You cannot escape," came the voice again, distorted and mocking, a cruel reminder of our fragility. We dashed through the dim chamber, weaving between columns of darkness, heartbeats pounding in sync as the air trembled with impending doom. I could feel the shadows clinging to my skirt, dragging me back, cherishing my fear like a long-lost friend. "This way!" I yelled, my voice hoarse as I spotted a flicker of light at the end of what seemed like a tunnel. But in that fleeting moment, the shadows surged, pushing past me like an angry ocean. They engulfed my friend, pulling her into the dark depths with a horrific wail. "No!" I cried, extending my hand, desperate. But the shadows were quicker, their grip unyielding, laughing like demons as they dragged her away. The sound of her cries echoed off the walls, reverberating through the fragile structure, twisting deeper into my heart than I thought possible. With a surge of panic, I turned to the others, who were just as paralyzed, caught between helping and fleeing. "We can't leave her!" I shouted frantically, but fear held them in place, and the dread pooling in my stomach began to warm like fire. "We have to go!" one friend shouted back, eyes wide, almost wild in the dim glow. "We can't let them take us too." I felt rage flare, a fight against the fear rippling through my veins as I recognized the loss of my friend, turning my heart to lead. And then, without thinking, I made a choice. "We won't abandon her!" I yelled, terrified but resolved, the shadows swirling with my words, whispering that it was too late, each promise filled with sinister delight. My friends hesitated, but as I turned back to the dark void, I knew that despite the overwhelming fear, I had to stand against the tide, to reach into the shadows and pull her back. In that moment of defiance, I sprinted toward the encroaching mass, pushing back with every ounce of willpower. And just as I reached the edge of darkness, the laughter morphed into shrieks, a cacophony rising in rage as I plunged my arm into the swirling shadow, reaching into the gray. "I won't let you take her!" I screamed, feeling the shadows pulse around my limbs, alive and thrumming with terror. But there was something deeper in there, a thrum of connection. I pictured my friend, the laughter and warmth we had shared, drawing strength from that memory as I pushed through the oppressive weight of despair. The shadows coiled and twisted around me, pulling tighter, and just before I thought I could hold on no longer, my fingers brushed against something solid, her warmth, her spirit flickering like a flame. "Got you!" I yelled, my voice a mixture of relief and desperation as I pulled with everything I had. The shadows writhed, howling in rage as I yanked my friend from their clutches, almost losing my balance, but feeling the electric tether that connected us. I felt her body collide with mine, And then, in an explosion of light that pierced the tranquil darkness, we broke free. But not without leaving something behind. As we stumbled into the flickering light, panic still stinging the air, I gazed back into the inky void and saw a specter, the monstrous figure lurking just beyond the edge of the light. Its eyes glimmered with a frightening hunger, and I realized my victory was only temporary, the real battle just now dawning. "Runs!" I shouted, and together we fled, the shadows still whispering behind us. But in my mind, I knew something else. They will return, and when they did, I would have to be ready. Still reeling after pulling my friend from the clutches of darkness, we stumbled into the sanctuary's flickering light, gasping for breath, adrenaline surging through us. But the moment of relief was fleeting. With every heartbeat, I could feel the oppressive weight of the shadows gathering again, testing the limits of their confinement as they thrashed in fury. My heart raced. "What do we do now?" I panted, my voice trembling as I turned toward my friends, desperation tinging my words. "We can't let them regroup," one of my friends urged, urgency saturating her tone. They glanced around, searching for something, anything, we could use against the looming threat that still lurked at the edges of our sanctuary. I felt a creeping sensation on my skin, like ice creeping across the back of my neck when I noticed it, a dark haze creeping up from the ground, wrapping around our feet like a serpent. The realization struck me like a punch to the gut. The shadows were not merely swirling around us, but were rising, eager to reclaim what they had lost. "We have to move," I yelled, panic inching into my voice as I tugged my friends toward the back of the room, where there seemed to be a narrow staircase leading upward into a dimly lit hall. I glanced back just in time to see a tendril lash out, striking the ground where we had been standing a moment before. "Come on!" I shouted, fear instilling urgency in my words as we dashed for the stairs, trying to outrun the rising darkness that howled and clawed at our heels. Each step felt like a race against time, the ground shaking beneath us as the shadows called for vengeance. As we climbed closer to the hall, I looked above, hoping for safety, but finding only a flickering light at the top, a fragile beacon in a world turned bleak and terrifying. The farther we moved from the sanctuary, the more tightly the shadows wound around one another, as if forming something monstrous and new, a twisted amalgamation of dread. "We can't stop now," I urged, hearing the low growls emanating from below, an unholy symphony of chaos. In that moment, I could hear the whispers echoing behind me, the same haunting tones that had tried to unravel my spirit before. "You'll never be free," they whispered, echoing in a chilling chorus. "You cannot escape your fate." Sweat dripped down my face, the warmth of it a stark contrast to the growing chill around me. And I forced myself to keep moving, shoving any thoughts of despair far into the corners of my mind. The staircase twisted and turned, and I could feel the shadows pooling below us, the ground itself breathing, shifting like a great beast stirring to life. The air grew colder, wrapping around us like a shroud, thick and heavy with despair. Suddenly, the floor beneath us creaked, the very wood groaning under the pressure of unseen forces. "Faster," I urged, propelling us forward, but I could feel the eerie tension creeping around us, like tendrils of darkness grasping at my feet, trying to pull me back down to the shadows from which I had escaped. When we finally reached the top of the stairs, I paused, my heart racing as I noticed the door leading into the hall was ajar, the scent of dampness wafting from the darkness beyond. "What's in there?" one of my friends asked, peering into the blackness, eyes wide and fearful. "I don't know, but we can't stay here," I replied, glancing back down the staircase. The shadows were swirling upward, undulating like living smoke, reaching for us with greedy fingers, whispering promises of despair and hopelessness. I pushed the door open, and we all poured into the hall, the darkness swallowing us whole. Once inside, I turned to shut the door behind us but stopped when I felt something cold brush against my arm, a whisper of frost that made my skin itch with fear. The walls were lined with shadows as well, pooling in the corners like forgotten memories, leaving only a thin beam of light to guide our way through the suffocating darkness enveloping us. "Where are we?" I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. I looked around, trying to gather my bearings. This hallway felt ancient, walls adorned with dusty portraits that seemed to watch our every move, their eyes flickering like dying stars. Every painting depicted sorrow, moments frozen in time, portraits of anguish. Suddenly, one of the portraits shifted, almost imperceptibly, but it felt as if the painted figure had drawn a breath, its eyes narrowing in a predatory gaze. I froze, a chill running down my spine, knowing that something was very wrong. "Did you see that?" I whispered, heart pounding. My friends nodded, their own terror mirrored in their faces. "We shouldn't be here," another friend murmured, glancing nervously at the shifting shapes in the shadows. But as we turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind us with a resounding bang, echoing through the empty hall like a death knell. "What the?" I began, panic rising again as we realized we were trapped. I rushed to the door, pushing against it with all my strength, but it wouldn't budge. Something unseen held it tightly shut. "Look," one friend gasped, pointing ahead. The air grew colder as a figure emerged from the darkness, its features obscured, but with an unmistakably human shape. It stepped forward, and I could see glimpses of an ethereal form, an amalgamation of shadow and light flickering about as if caught between two worlds. "I am the keeper here," it intoned, the chilling resonance of its voice vibrating through the air, almost as if it was both a sound and a thought. "You should not have come." The figure raised a hand, and in that instant, I felt an overwhelming wave of despair swell within me, dragging me down into an ocean of sadness. Each heartbeat echoed like a drum, resonating through the hall as the walls seemed to pulse with the despair of the countless souls trapped within. I could see the shadows stretching out, creeping toward us from the depths of the darkness. With every flicker of light, more shapes emerged from the gloom. Figures twisted and distorted, their mouths open in silent screams, eyes wide with unfathomable terror. They looked like reflections of me, caught in a cycle of fear, each one more anguished than the last. "Help us," they mouthed, helpless and desperate, unending agony written across their faces. I stumbled back, the world spinning, my breath coming in short gasps as my mind grappled with the reality. "What do you want from us?" I screamed, feeling the weight of despair pressing down hard. The keeper's gaze was fixed on me, piercing and cold. "You must face your fears, embrace the darkness within, or be consumed by it." I felt a pull toward the nightmares, memories of my own failures clawing at the edges of my mind, threatening to unravel me once more. "No!" I shouted against the pressing weight of doubt. "I will not give in to you." But as I spoke, the shadows surged, wrapping around my legs, climbing higher, squeezing tighter, threatening to pull me into the depths of their hell. The figures in the painting seemed to lean closer, their faces twisting in torment, and as they moved, the air thickened with despair, suffocating me. "You cannot escape," they echoed, a disturbing chorus of agony. In that moment, I realized this was no ordinary hall, but a trap, a canvas where fears intertwined, feeding on our vulnerabilities, aiming to break me down. "Together," I yelled, grabbing my friends' hands, rallying them. "We can fight this." We began to chant, a rhythmic mantra against the overwhelming despair, finding strength in our unity. As the shadows swirled around us, our voices rose in defiance, and for a moment, the darkness trembled at our approach. But as we pressed on, the keeper moved closer, its form shifting, melding with the shadows, a creature of both darkness and light, an embodiment of our deepest fears. "You cannot win," it hissed, the words dripping with malice. "In the end, you will belong to us." I felt a surge of fear pierce through my heart, threatening to cut off my voice, but I wouldn't let it take hold. I remembered my friend, the bond we shared, and with a mighty shove of will, I broke through the barriers of despair that clawed at my thoughts. "I choose hope." I called, voicing every ounce of strength I could muster, my voice ringing out like a beacon through the dark. And as we stood shoulder to shoulder, the darkness recoiled, seething with rage, the whispers dimming to murmurs. "You cannot choose the light forever," it hissed, thrashing against our combined voices. But we wouldn't yield. As we stood firm, I felt the shadows flicker, battling against our resolve, and amid the chaos, a light began to shine, a pulsating glow that pushed against the dark, illuminating the hall around us. It rippled through the shadows, and I could feel it pushing back, daring to reclaim the hollow spaces that despair had filled. Together, I whispered to my friends, heart racing, we fight with every ounce of love in our memories. The air vibrated with our unity, and as we reached toward the light, it exploded, radiating warmth and engulfing the darkness in fiery tendrils. The keeper's figure twisted in agony, its ghastly visage contorting as the light surged stronger, illuminating the hall until the darkness receded, revealing the true forms of those we'd seen trapped all along. But it would not surrender easily. "You can't escape your fate," the keeper bellowed, its voice an unholy roar that reverberated through the halls, threatening to tear everything apart. In the fury of the confrontation, I glimpsed something in its eyes, a reflection of my own deepest fears. "What are you?" I challenged, determined not to give in to the paralyzing fear that threatened to pull me in once more. "I am your doubt, your regrets, your shadows made flesh." The very ground shook beneath us as the keeper lunged forward, a wave of darkness crashing against our light. But we held firm, pooling our energy, shouting against despair. "We are not afraid," I cried, and together, we forced the power of our memories, the light of our hope, against the chaotic surge of shadows. With each chord of defiance, the shadows shrieked, disintegrating against our resolve. Yet the keeper loomed larger, filling the gaps with malice. I could feel my strength waning and desperation clawed at me. Each whisper from the keeper promising release from this battle, if only I would take a step back into the comfort of darkness. "You will never break me," I said, digging deeper. A flicker of doubt crossed my friends' faces, but I raised my voice over the tumult. "Remember why we fight. Remember each other." And as if echoing my resolve, a warmth surged within me, filling the spaces that doubt had tainted, glowing brighter as my friends clasped hands tighter in support. The shadows screamed one last time, a cacophony of lost souls colliding, the keeper thrashing against the light, desperately trying to swallow it whole. But as we pressed forward, starved of our unity, I knew we had the power to overcome, to shine through the darkness that sought to consume us. And then it happened. A surge of brilliant light erupted, engulfing everything in its brilliance, forcing the keeper to retreat, its cries muted by the dazzling radiance that illuminated our way. But I understood this wasn't just about fighting back. It was about embracing everything the darkness represented, recognizing that fear could also be a part of me, part of my journey. Suddenly, in the midst of the dazzling chaos, I caught a glimpse of a dark shape moving back within the echoes, sliding away into an unseen void. And just as quickly as it had started, the shadows fell silent, leaving only the echoes of fading screams. We stood together, shaking but resolute as the light began to settle around us. But uncertainty settled within me, knowing that our battle was won. Yet the war was far from over. "We need to get out of here," I said, the weight of danger still heavy in my chest. The hall had shifted, mottled shadows now entwined with the fading light, creating a haze that flickered between reality and nightmare. I could feel an unsettling tension in the air, like the aftermath of a storm that had only just begun to settle. A low dripping sound echoed somewhere ahead, rhythmic and haunting, as if the very walls were weeping. "We need to stay together," I said, glancing nervously at my friends, who looked equally shaken, their faces pale under the dim light. The corridor stretched endlessly in front of us, each step forward filled with trepidation. I took a deep breath, trying to quell the fear that was wrapping around my mind like a vice. The moment we entered the hall fully, the temperature dropped, chills crawling along my skin, as though the very essence of despair lingered just beyond sight. But there was something else, a murmur lingering at the edge of my consciousness. It was faint, almost imperceptible, yet in it, I could hear echoes of lost hopes and dreams, the very essence of what the shadows had stolen. As we moved deeper into the hall, I could almost see the shapes of those lost souls swirling around us, their faces twisted in silent cries, their movements soft yet desperate. "Do you feel that?" my friend whispered, her voice trembling as she pointed toward a flickering light at the far end. I stilled, my breath catching in my throat. In the dim glow, I could make out a figure standing still, shrouded in darkness, a silhouette against the light flickering like a candle on the verge of being snuffed out. "We should go," another friend said, fear evident in her eyes, but curiosity tugged at me, urging me closer. "No, wait," I said, stepping forward despite the rising dread. The figure began to shift, stepping toward the light as if it was beckoning me, and for a fleeting moment, I felt an overwhelming compulsion to draw closer. But as I took another step, the light dimmed and flickered violently, throwing monstrous shadows that twisted and contorted in unnatural ways. "What is it?" I called, but the words barely escaped my lips before the figure vanished into the abyss of darkness. My stomach dropped. "We need to be careful," I urged, my voice low as I glanced around, feeling the weight of unseen eyes tracking our every movement. The air felt thick, and I could hear that rhythmic dripping again, louder now, as the walls seemed to shift and close in like a living entity, hungry and alive. My heart raced at the realization that the shadows were not just a backdrop. They were a presence, a living breath of malevolence that surrounded us. "What if we're not alone?" I murmured, my gaze darting around, seeking some form of clarity amid the encroaching dread. Without warning, a loud crash echoed from behind, sending us jumping as a portrait fell from the wall, shattering on the ground in a rain of glass. In that instant, I noticed a chilling detail. The figure in the portrait was the same as the one we had seen before, but now its eyes were wide and panicked, its mouth opening in a silent scream that sent shivers down my spine. "We need to leave," I whispered urgently, turning on my heel, but the moment I did, the exit we had come through was gone, replaced by a wall of shadows, swirling and pulsating like a living entity, effectively trapping us in this nightmare. "What the hell is happening?" my friend gasped, panic rising in her voice. I felt a similar urgency as dread clawed at my insides, realizing the implications of being locked in a space where the boundaries between fear and reality twisted into confusion. "We have to find another way out," I said, my voice edged with tension as I scanned for alternatives. Suddenly, I sensed movement behind us, shadows merging and coalescing into shapes that seemed to beckon and tease, whispering promises of despair as they encircled us. I could feel my breath quicken as one shadow detached itself, morphing into a figure dripping with darkness, hollow eyes glinting dimly in the low light. "Join us," it hissed, voice dripping with malice, drawing closer. "Embrace the shadows." The shadows around me surged, and I knew we had to hold on to our resolve, to fight against this creeping descent into madness. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. But it didn't back off. It reached out a hand, a grasp of ethereal darkness that chilled the air around me, and I could feel its pull, trying to ensnare my very essence. "Help!" I gasped, turning to my friends, but they were similarly caught, frozen in place as the specter wreaked havoc in their minds, their fears spilling forth like a torrent. I was losing them. "No!" I cried, struggling, forcing myself into action despite the paralyzing fear that threatened to consume me. I grabbed the nearest friend's arm, and with a fierce determination, I pulled her back from the precipice of despair, drawing on the warmth of our shared memories to banish the encroaching darkness. "Remember who we are!" I shouted, and somehow, she broke free from the shadow's grip, her eyes wide and alert. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted again, A palpable sense of resistance pulsed through us, and the shadows recoiled, screeching in fury at our defiance. "We have to work together," I yelled, rallying my friends as we faced the encroaching darkness once more, holding tightly together, standing shoulder to shoulder like a shield against the murky tide. The flickering light seemed to flicker more violently not far from us, a potential source of hope hidden beneath the chaos. "Let's move toward the light," I urged, finding strength in my voice even, as it trembled, beckoning my friends to follow despite the suffocating shadows lurking close behind. Gripping hands tightly, we pushed forward, finding our way through the hall, moving quickly although our hearts thundered with fear, urging us to turn back. The figure loomed ahead, its shadow darkening the path before us, but I refused to yield. "We are not afraid," I cried again, pushing into the light's glow, feeling warmth pushing against the cold that consumed us. But with every step, a chilling realization swept through me. The shadows around us shifted subtly, coiling tighter like a spring ready to explode. I could hear their muffled voices again, calling from the depths, whispering promises that shook my resolve. "You can't resist," they cooed, wrapping their words around me like a heavy blanket. But I fought the sensation, focusing instead on the warmth of my friends beside me, using their strength to fortify my own dwindling will. "Stick together. Keep moving," I shouted, and the urgency in my voice pushed us forward despite the chaos closing in on us. As we approached closer to the figure in the light, I realized it was a mirror, an ominous reflection of ourselves standing in depthless darkness. A version twisted and distorted, chaotic energies flickering within. Each one of us bore a resemblance, but the reflections were grotesque, our eyes hollow and sunken, features marred with pain and sorrow. "No!" I screamed, raising my hands to block the vision, only for the reflection to smile back at me with malevolent glee. "You belong to us," it whispered, each syllable laced with chilling delight, resonating through my mind. The vision pulsed, and shadows reached out from the mirror, sliding across the floor toward us, a roiling tide of despair eager to claim us. "Fight it," I urged, squeezing my friends' hands tighter, urging them to focus amidst the overwhelming dread and darkness. The light intensified as we stood firm, defiant against the shadows encroaching upon us. And as our collective will surged, the dim glow steadied, pushing back against the tide with a blinding brilliance. But the keeper was not done yet. "You will leave your truths behind," it roared, and the shadows quickly exploded outward, swallowing the light whole and plunging us into the cold abyss of darkness once more. As panic rose, I felt a deep rumble beneath my feet, the very hall vibrating with restless energy that turned my stomach. "We have to find a way out. Now!" I bellowed, pushing forward, trying to locate any hint of an exit amid the swirling shadows and the cacophony of agony echoing throughout. The wall seemed to twitch and pulse, my pulse syncing with the rhythm of something ancient and malevolent. A door materialized further ahead, silhouetted against the encroaching darkness. "There! We can make it!" I shouted, urging my friends toward it as I sprinted forward, determination surging in my veins. The shadows reared back in fury, their whispers rising into a cacophony that assaulted my senses, promising my deepest fears would come true if I dared to flee from their grasp. But I pushed against them, gripping the handle of the door as my friends joined me, each one's breath quickening with our shared terror, yet our collective hope shining like a beacon. "On three!" I shouted, ready to make our final stand. 1, 2, 3. With all our strength, we yanked the door open, plunging into the blinding light that emanated from beyond. But in that moment of clarity, the shadows surged one last time, grasping at our heels, fingers brushing under my skin, urging me to look back one final time. Just before the light engulfed us completely, I caught a glimpse of the keeper, its eyes burning hot with rage as it reached out, gnashing its teeth, a silhouette of relentless despair screaming into the void. "You cannot escape," echoed in my mind. It was a warning, a promise, that the shadows would never truly be gone. But in that moment, lit by the radiance beyond the door, I chose to embrace the light, pushing my fears back into the darkness, committed to fighting the shadows endlessly. Together, we stepped forward into the unknown, the door slamming shut behind us with a final thud, sealing the darkness away. But I knew deep down, it would haunt me still. I had escaped, but the shadows would always linger just out of reach, waiting for the moment when I might let my guard down, yearning to reclaim their hold on my shattered soul. As I stepped through the door, I found myself in a narrow hallway dimly lit by flickering fluorescent lights. An unsettling hum filled the air, vibrating against my skin like an electric current. The walls were lined with peeling wallpaper, revealing damp, crumbling plaster underneath. Every crack seemed to whisper secrets of long-forgotten fears and unbridled despair. "Where are we?" I asked my friends, glancing back to make sure they followed me into this new, eerie space. "I don't know," one replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But as I took a step deeper into the hall, the temperature dropped even further. A bone-chilling cold wrapped around me, sinking into my bones. My breath fogged in the air, ghostly tendrils swirling before my face, and I tried to focus on the sounds of my friends behind me to ground myself. The deeper I got, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. Every step echoed loudly, amplifying the unsettling silence, and shadows flickered just beyond my line of sight, darting away whenever I turned to confront them. I heard a faint scratching sound, like fingernails clawing desperately at the other side of the wall, sending a shiver coursing through me. "Did you hear that?" I asked, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck prickle. "Yeah," my friend responded, her eyes wide with fear. Before I could react, the lights flickered again, plunging us into near-total darkness for a second, and I felt a rush of panic. Then, at the edge of the corridor, a door creaked open, revealing an austere room bathed in weak, sickly light. With a mix of dread and curiosity, I stepped closer, urging my friends to do the same. The door swung open slowly, revealing a room filled with dust and forgotten memories. Old furniture sagged under the weight of yesterday's sorrow, and a mirror hung crookedly on the wall, its surface clouded. As I stepped inside, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror, but it wasn't just my reflection. It was distorted, my features twisted and stretched unnaturally. "Look," I said, pointing to the glass, but my friends hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether to join me. The reflection grinned back at me, a wicked smile that sent chills crawling down my spine. And for a moment, I felt the urge to step closer to the glass, to know what lay behind that wicked grin. "Stay away from it," my one friend whispered, her voice quaking, as if she could sense what I could not. But I couldn't pull my gaze away. The mirror's surface shimmered like water, and I felt a sickening pull from within. Shadows danced around the edges, swirling with a life of their own, beckoning me into the depths. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed behind me, and I turned sharply, my heart racing. The door had slammed shut, the noise reverberating through the room, sealing us in with the throbbing darkness. "What just happened?" I gasped, feeling the adrenaline surge through me. Panic coursed through us, and I could sense my friends inching closer. Suddenly, we were all trapped in this ghostly room, heavily laden with a foreboding presence. The shadows seemed to close in on us, pushing against our resolve, dimming. The weak light, and that ghastly reflection in the mirror took on a life of its own, moving beyond the glass with malevolent intent. "We have to get out of here," I shouted, pounding on the heavy door, desperate for escape. But instead of budging, it felt almost as if something were holding it shut from the other side, like whatever dwelled within these walls had no intention to let us go. Then, I heard soft, muffled giggles echoing from the corners of the room, chilling laughter that seeped into my bones, rattling my sense of safety. They were faint but taunting, beckoning me closer as if the shadows themselves were alive, ready to feast on our fear. I turned to my friends, and their faces were pale, eyes reflecting sheer terror. "What is going on?" One of them whimpered, her voice trembling. I don't know, I admitted, heart pounding louder than ever. But we can't give in. We have to find another way. The mirror's reflection flickered, and for an instant, I saw a glimpse of a dark room beyond my own. A chamber filled with figures cloaked in shadows, their features obscured but their eyes gleaming with insatiable hunger. Something shifted in the corner of the room, and I turned just in time to see movement. An erratic scrambling of something not quite human, its limbs twisted and grotesque. What emerged was an amalgamation of shadows, coiling and unraveling in a way that defied logic, eyes swirling like voids, and it let out a bone-chilling screech, sending waves of fear crashing over me. "Run!" I screamed, and without hesitation, we sprinted toward the far wall in frantic desperation. We stumbled through the darkness, racing against the relentless shadows that stretched and lunged at us, eager to drag us into their cold embrace. In our frantic push, I spotted a faint outline of a second door, hidden in the shadows, promising an exit from this horror. "There! Over there!" I shouted, pointing with urgency, and we dashed toward it, adrenaline surging. But just as I reached for the handle, the room shuddered, walls vibrating as if they were alive. With one powerful wave of dark energy, the floor beneath us cracked, splitting open to reveal a swirling abyss below, black and endless, a gaping maw waiting to swallow us whole. The laughter rose again, echoing around us, dark and jubilant, as if the shadows celebrated our disarray. I pulled on the door handle, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't budge. "It won't open," I hollered, straining against it, fear coursing through me like a poisonous snake. The shadows closed in, the twisted figure looming ever closer, and it raised a hand toward me, fingers extending like claws, reaching for my soul. "No, no, no!" I screamed, my heart pounding in my chest, but my voice was drowned out by the cacophony of despair surrounding us. Suddenly, I locked eyes with the reflection in the mirror one last time, and at that moment, something shifted within me. The haunted expression of the figure mirrored my own fear, but somewhere deep within that tortured visage, I saw something else. A flicker of defiance, a silent acknowledgement of strength I had yet to unleash. "I won't give in," I screamed, breaking free from the encircling shadows, my heart igniting with fierce determination. With every ounce of will I could summon, I pushed against the door again, and this time, I felt a tremor of resistance begin to give way. "Together!" I cried, urging my friends to join me as we pressed our shoulders against the door, uniting our strength against the impending darkness. The shadows recoiled, the figure thrashing and screeching in rage, and somehow, the light from outside seeped in through the cracks, illuminating our desperate escape. With one final heave, the door burst open, releasing a blaze of light that engulfed the room, sending the shadows screaming and writhing back into the abyss. "Now!" I shouted, and we surged through the door, tumbling into the blinding light outside. But even as we stumbled into the light, I could hear the whispering of the shadows echoing in my mind, a chilling reminder that they were never far behind. "You can't escape," they hissed softly. Their laughter echoed with a cruel finality, a promise that the darkness would always linger, waiting for the next moment of weakness, ready to reclaim what I had forged with great effort. We emerged into a new space, fresh scents filling the air. But the sense of relief was fleeting. The shadows were still there, hovering just at the edges of my vision, waiting, watching, biding their time. And as I turned back to my friends, I noticed their expressions were blank, eyes vacant, as if they had been marked by the darkness we had escaped. "What happened in there?" I asked, but my voice trembled in the growing fear rising within me. One of them raised a trembling hand, pointing behind us, and I felt my heart drop. "It's still here," she whispered, her voice cracking. I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach as I prepared to face the shadows once more. But instead, I found only a hallway leading onward. Darkness stretched out before me, chasms gaping in my feet, crisscrossed with flickering lights in the distance, a foreboding maze that promised more horror ahead. "What do we do now?" I asked, panic seizing me again. "We have to keep moving," my friend said, a tremor in her voice, hinting at the uncertainty in her heart. There could still be a way out. Tentatively, we stepped forward into the darkness, where each step resonated with both uncertainty and fear, and shadows loomed larger than life behind us, whispering of our missteps, urging us to turn back into the void. "Stay with me," I urged, clutching my friend's hand tightly. As we ventured deeper into this foreboding unknown, the pressure of unseen eyes watching, waiting for us to surrender to despair. With every step I took, I could feel the weight of the shadows creeping ever closer, ready to drag me back into the depths of my own fears, begging me to let go and return to the darkness I had fought so hard to escape. But I refused to yield, for deep down, I knew that to fight this battle, I had to face whatever awaited us in the shadows, unearthing every fear buried beneath the surface if we had any hope of reclaiming our light once and for all. We stepped further into the dark hallway, the air thickening with a sense of lingering dread that wrapped around us like a suffocating shroud. Each step echoed loud and hollow, drowning out any sound of our breathing, amplifying the growing fear clawing at my chest. The walls seemed to close in, pulsating like a living organism, heartbeats thumping against the cold plaster. It felt as if the corridor itself was watching us, judging our every move. I glanced back at my friends, but their faces were twisted in anxiety, eyes darting nervously as the shadows shifted behind us, slithering along the edges like predatory beasts waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "We need to find a way out," I urged, but deep down, I could feel the gnawing sense of hopelessness creeping in, a whisper of despair trying to convince me that escape wasn't possible. As we continued forward, I noticed a door to my left, decrepit and old. The wood was splintered, dark stains marred its surface, and an overwhelming sense of foreboding surged through me. "What if it leads to something worse?" one of my friends suggested hesitantly, but the curiosity was too strong to ignore. "We have to check it out," I replied, my heart racing as I approached the door with trepidation. I pushed it open. The creak of the hinges sliced through the silence like a knife. Inside was a small room, cluttered with discarded belongings, remnants of lives once lived. A flickering light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. "What is this place?" I murmured, stepping inside. The air was musty, filled with the scent of rot and decay, as if time had forgotten this little corner of the world. In one corner, I spotted an old rocking chair, gently swaying back and forth, as if some unseen force was still sitting in it, watching us with hollow eyes. My heart raced as I moved closer, and the chair suddenly stopped, the silence wrapping around me like a vice. Then, I noticed a small box on the floor, covered in dust. With trembling fingers, I lifted it, the weight feeling heavier than it should have. "What's in there?" a friend asked, her voice shaky, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the box either. Taking a deep breath, I unlatched it, the rusted clasp protesting against my touch. Inside were photographs, faded and yellowed with age, capturing blurry images of people standing where we now stood, their faces contorted in expressions of horror. "Jesus," I whispered, heart hammering wildly. Each photo seemed to bleed despair, an echo of their final moments before whatever haunted this place claimed them. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, plunging us into darkness for a heartbeat before they stuttered back to life. When they did, the photographs had shifted. Now, they revealed shadows creeping into the frame behind the living, dark figures swirling violently, reaching out as if hungry for soul and spirit. I dropped the box, scrambling backward as the shadows in the corners of the room twisted and slithered closer, expanding as if being summoned by the horror we had unleashed. "We have to get out now," I shouted, trying to pull my friends back toward the door, but they remained transfixed by the images, frozen in terror. With a burst of raw fear, I seized their shoulders, yanking them away just as the shadows lunged forward, merging into one massive form, a grotesque caricature of what we feared most. "Run!" I screamed, racing for the exit, dragging my friends with me as the room echoed with the howls of lost souls caught in a relentless cycle of despair. We stumbled back into the hallway, breathless and panicked, the door slamming shut behind us with an ominous finality, sealing whatever nightmare we had unleashed. The oppressive darkness seemed to push against us, forming a wall of dread that threatened to engulf us whole. And as we turned to flee deeper into the corridor, I felt a cold hand gripping my ankle from beneath, pulling me back into the abyss. I screamed, my voice echoing wildly down the hall, the sound ricocheting off the walls, mingling with the whispers that swirled like a storm all around us. "Don't look back," one of my friends shouted, and instinctively, I jerked my gaze forward, forcing my legs to run. But the shadows laughed around me, a cacophony of twisted mirth that curdled my blood, and the sensation of claws scraping against my skin intensified with every frantic pulse. We raced down the corridor, unsure of where we were heading, the flickering lights ahead promising some kind of escape, but the shadows had a relentless grip, twisting and turning, pursuing us like a pack of starving wolves. Every step felt like it was through molasses. The shadows pulled me backward, and I could feel their icy breath washing over me, freezing my resolve. "Keep going," I shouted, determination flooding my veins as I summoned the strength to tear free from their grasp. Suddenly, I saw the flicker of light grow brighter, spilling warm, golden rays into the shadows, and I sprinted toward it, dragging my friends behind me. As we reached the end of the hallway, I found myself standing before another door, this one polished and inviting, bathed in a halo of light. "This has to be it," I yelled, hopeful, but my friends hesitated, glancing back at the dark corridor that lurked behind. "Something feels off," one whispered, but our time was running short. Without thinking, I flung the door open, stepping over the threshold into a room where the air was charged with an electric pulse, where walls glimmered with an otherworldly sheen. But as soon as I crossed the threshold, that hopeful light faded rapidly. The room expanded before us, stretching impossibly, and the door slammed shut behind us, sealing the dark corridor away, but not the shadow that rose before us. "What now?" I breathed, gazing into the deepening darkness creeping along the walls, a presence more massive than anything I had faced before. The shadows reassembled, morphing into a towering figure, a grotesque amalgamation of dread and despair, its form barely holding together as if it were made of fog. Its eyes burned with the intensity of the abyss, and its voice echoed with the weight of countless souls lost to darkness. "You thought you escaped?" It hissed, a low, unsettling sound that rattled my core. We didn't mean to," I stammered, backing away slowly, a feeling of insignificance washing over me as the figure leaned closer. "You are mine," it said, each word cloaked in malice, stirring an instinctive terror in my gut. The room itself shifted, the floor beneath us trembling, and I glanced at my friends, fear mirrored in their wide eyes, and I could feel the weight of despair closing in on us, ready to crush us. "We can't let it win," I shouted, my voice trembling as I scrambled for the strength to fight. In that moment, I remembered the light that had pushed back the darkness. Summoning every ounce of defiance within myself, I reached for my friends. "Together," I shouted, feeling the energy pulsating between us, a flicker of hope igniting amidst the terror swirling around us. They nodded, grasping hands tightly as I focused on the feeling of warmth, the shared memories pushing back against the encroaching dread. The shadows wailed angrily, sensing our resolve, and as I concentrated, the light flickered to life again from within us, intensifying like a flare piercing through the black fog. "You will not take us," I cried, feeling invincible as the light surged and erupted, illuminating the room, banishing the shadows momentarily. But the figure shrieked, its form twisting in agony, and the darkness retaliated, crashing against us like a tidal wave, threatening to swallow that fleeting light whole. I could feel the energy around me wavering, splintering against the relentless tide, and I feared it wouldn't hold much longer. "Fight! Fight!" my friends urged, their voices mixing with the rising chaos. and in a moment of desperation, I shouted the words I needed to hear myself. "We are stronger than this darkness. We will break free." And just as I uttered those words, a crack split across the room, the air vibrating with power. A circle of light erupted from the center, radiating outward, bathing everything in a blinding brilliance that shattered the shadows retreating from its path. The figure recoiled, shrieking as the light began to sweep across the room, illuminating every dark corner, revealing the twisted forms trying to hide. I felt the power swelling around us, and as the figure writhed, I realized that what we had unleashed was more than just a fight for survival. It was a collective strength, a unity forged through our trials and fears. "Together, always together," I shouted again, the words cascading from my lips like a chant, urging my friends to hold on to that light, to the hope we could cultivate even amidst horror. The shadows began to dissolve, the oppressive presence clawing at my spirit retreating against the onslaught of our brilliant light. And in that moment, I understood that the darkness, no matter how overwhelming, could never extinguish the spark of our shared strength. We pushed forward, hands clasped tightly together as we would not allow fear to dictate our fate. With every collective heartbeat resonating through the room, we became an unstoppable force, driving the darkness back, further and further, until we reached the core of the abyss itself. The light exploded outward, a shockwave that sent the shadows screaming into oblivion, their cries echoing through the void. And for the first time, I felt peace settle over me like a warm blanket. With one final surge of energy, the dark figure collapsed, its form dissipating into nothingness, the pressure that had gripped my heart lifting. I turned to my friends, their faces glowing in the aftermath, and for a fleeting moment, we stood together, no longer just survivors, but warriors who had faced the depths of darkness and emerged victorious. But as the dust began to settle, I couldn't shake the feeling that this battle wasn't truly over, that the shadows still lingered, watching from the corners of our reality, waiting for cracks in our strength to seep back in. I felt a shiver race down my spine, as I knew that while we had fought back this time, the darkness wasn't gone. It was merely biding its time, watching and waiting for the next opportunity to strike. With my heart pounding and my mind racing, I turned to my friends, knowing that whatever lay ahead, we would continue fighting together and refuse to surrender. The shadows may have receded, but I was not naive enough to think they would not return, and I would be ready, armed with the light we had forged in shared strength, ready to face whatever horror awaited us next. As we stood in the aftermath, I noticed something flickering in the corner of my eye. It was faint, a lingering darkness creeping back at the edges of the room, curling around like a serpent, as if drawn to the energy of our light. "What is that?" one of my friends whispered, her voice barely above a breath, fear creeping back into her tone. I squinted, instinctively stepping closer to the flickering glow, but before I could fully comprehend the scene, the darkness surged forward. The light we had created pulsed wildly, flickering like a dying ember while the shadows writhed, twisting and turning, seeking a way to envelop us once again. Tendrils of darkness snaked out, reaching for my ankles like the desperate hands of the damned, clawing at the edges of my mind with wicked whispers. "You thought you could escape?" they hissed, the voices of the lost merging with the shadows, filling the air with despair. My heart sank as I realized that the darkness wasn't just a force. It was a collective consciousness, a tapestry of tormented souls forever bound to this realm, waiting for someone to join them. "Stay together," I shouted, my voice a mix of resolve and growing panic as the shadows pulsed around us, ready to drain the last of our courage. In that moment, I saw the flicker of light dimming further and shadows closed in tighter, as if sensing our faltering resolve. "There's got to be something we can do," I yelled as I tried to fend off the creeping despair, glancing desperately around the room for any sign of escape or redemption. Suddenly, I recalled the photographs we had found, the distorted faces caught in a moment of horror. What if we use their energy? I blurted out, a wild idea blossoming in my mind. We have to reach out to them, to connect. Without waiting for a response, I clenched my fists and concentrated, calling out to the lingering souls, hoping to bridge the gap between our worlds. "We are here with you. You are not alone," I shouted, pouring every ounce of conviction into my voice, the sound bouncing off the walls like a war cry. The shadows recoiled momentarily, and the flickers grew brighter again, sparking a connection to the countless souls lost to despair, their energies swirling around us. To my astonishment, faint whispers began to rise, resonating through the air, echoing our words of solidarity. "Help set us free," they called, the sound carrying the weight of centuries of suffering, melting into a chorus that entwined with the fabric of the shadows. Emboldened by their pleas, I squeezed my friends' hands even tighter, urging them to join me in this desperate call for liberation. Together, we focused on the flickering light within, visualizing the free spirits swirling around us, drawing on their energy as the shadows clawed angrily at the edges. The walls shook, trembling in response to our combined strength, the air thick with the intensity of our hopes battling against despair. With every syllable, I felt the shadows weaken, their grasp loosening as the light spread, illuminating the dark corners of the room that had been hidden for too long. "You don't belong here," I shouted, my voice trembling with passion, mixing with the echoes of the lost souls. The darkness roared in furious defiance, flickering and snapping like a malignant creature at the edge of existence. But we pushed on, unwavering in our resolve. As the room erupted with blinding light, a scream tore through the shadows, a lamentation that echoed off the walls, reverberating with agony and rage. "No, you will not take them from me," it bellowed, but we stood resolute, holding space for those who had suffered far too long. Then, in an explosive wave of brilliance, the light surged forward, wrapping around the shadows like chains forged from purity, and I watched as the darkness writhed, twisting and bubbling until it began to shatter like glass. Fingers of light raced outward, and I felt the energy of countless souls merging with ours, breaking free from the chains of despair, drawing the warmth of freedom into their broken spirits. As the darkness shattered, the walls of the room trembled violently, and I sensed the very fabric of the space ripping apart around us, the shadows dissolving into the light like mist in the sun's embrace. The specters of the lost souls danced in a whirlwind of brilliance, their anguished faces morphing into expressions of relief and liberation, merging into one radiant beacon of hope, illuminating our path forward. In that glorious moment, I knew we had won. The power surged through me, filling every corner of my being, and I felt a weight lift, the collective burden of countless souls freed, finally released from an eternity of torment. But as the last remnants of darkness evaporated into nothingness, I noticed a shadow lingering at the very edge of the light, a tendril that refused to vanish completely. A chill washed over me, bringing with it a sense of impending dread, as I understood that while we had battled this shadow, others still lurked, waiting. I turned to my friends, urgency flashing in my eyes as I spoke. "We can't let our guard down. This was just a battle, not the end of the war." They nodded, still caught in the awe of our victory, but I could see faint remnants of unease creeping into their hearts as the last flickers faded into the silence. "What if it comes back?" one friend asked, hesitating at the thought. "Then we will be ready," I replied, my voice steady and reassuring, knowing deep inside that the shadows would always try to reclaim what had been lost. As we stepped back into the world outside, light flooded over us, washing away the remnants of the darkness we had faced. But those unsettling whispers still echoed softly in my mind, promising that the shadows would return. For now, we had triumphed, and as we emerged from that cursed place, I felt a renewed sense of purpose surge within me. I vowed to remain vigilant, armed with the knowledge that our bond had forged a light strong enough to face even the darkest of nightmares. And though the shadows would always linger, I understood that I was never truly alone, for the light of those I fought alongside would always guide me, even into the unknown.